Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 2 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as Rasa of the Sand and brought greatness to the Sand Village. Let the tale begin. Chapter 26, Rasa vs. Jiraiya. Inside the Konohagakure camp, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to that of Sunagakure. While the latter's camp might have seemed relatively calm, the mood in Konohagakure was tense. The pressure of fighting on three fronts weighed heavily on every Konoha shinobi, each one worried about the future of the village, especially with the decisive battle set for tomorrow. Inside Minato's tent, the air was thick with anticipation. Minato and Jiraiya sat, listening intently to an ANBU report. Apologies, Jiraiya-sama, Minato-sama. Our operatives were unable to gather any intelligence from the Sunagakure camp. We cannot confirm if the Fourth Kazekage is still present. Even the Hyuga clan's Byakugan and Shibi's insects couldn't confirm it? Minato asked, his voice calm yet filled with concern. No. Our camps are about 5 kilometers apart, which is beyond the range of both the Byakugan and Shibi-sama's insects. In addition, Sunagakure has shinobi patrolling the plains between our positions, making it difficult for our forces to get close. Jiraiya ran a hand through his hair in frustration. It seems like Sunagakure was well prepared for this. Minato, however, seemed lost in thought. His brow furrowed as he mulled over the situation. Sensei, something about Sunagakure's actions in this war feels strange. Oh? What do you mean? Jiraiya asked, intrigued. Minato took a moment, carefully considering his words before speaking. I don't know if it's just my imagination, but it seems to me that Sunagakure isn't really trying to wage an all-out war against us. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. What makes you say that? Minato continued, his gaze sharp. First, their strategy was highly unorthodox. Kumogakure and Iwagakure have always engaged us near the border or in disputed territories. But Sunagakure, they bypassed that strategy entirely and struck deep into the Land of Fire. Furthermore, our intel shows they didn't bring enough supplies for a prolonged conflict. Jiraiya nodded, encouraging him to go on. Second, their actions in this war have been restrained. The Kazekage, especially, seems more focused on avenging the Third Kazekage than waging a full-scale war. But that doesn't seem like the whole story, especially considering their sudden withdrawal. It's all starting to feel off. Minato leaned forward slightly, his tone becoming more serious. And lastly, we were told Sunagakure sent 3,000 shinobi for this operation. But on our front, we've only encountered about 300, mostly Chunin and Jonin. Where are the Jinin? What are they hiding? Jiraiya rubbed his forehead, clearly troubled by these questions, but he had no answers. This is a real headache. So, what's the plan for tomorrow? Minato sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. The Hokage's orders are to delay the battle as long as possible, to avoid a full-scale confrontation with Sunagakure. We can make some concessions if necessary, but if push comes to shove, we'll have no choice but to engage in battle. Jiraiya let out a long breath, understanding the gravity of the situation. It was clear that the Hokage had no intention of holding Danzo accountable for his actions. If anything, it seemed the Hokage might have quietly condoned them all along. With a frustrated sigh, Jiraiya muttered under his breath. When will this war ever end? Night fell quickly, casting a shadow over the battlefield. The Konoha shinobi started lighting their campfires, preparing meals, and maintaining a sense of routine. However, the tension in the air was palpable, as the battle lines on the plains remained drawn. Both Sunagakure and Konohagakure shinobi patrolled the area, ever watchful for any signs of movement. Visibility was severely limited once night settled in, and the Konoha shinobi knew the risks of getting too close to Sunagakure's forces. On the Sunagakure side, wisps of smoke rose into the dark sky, and the flicker of campfires illuminated the encampment. But a closer inspection would reveal a strange absence. There wasn't a single soul in sight. Where had all the Sunagakure shinobi gone? At the edge of the plains, nestled within the forest, the Sunagakure forces had already executed a detour, positioning themselves just 1 kilometer away from the Konoha camp. From this distance, The Kanagakur camp was visible, but beyond this range, Konoha's sensory shinobi would detect their presence. Rasa, standing among his gathered forces, stared ahead with grim determination. "It's time," he said, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "For the Third Kazekage, revenge begins now." "Yeah." The Sunagakure shinobi responded in unison, their eyes glowing with a fierce crimson light. This night was destined to be one of bloodshed. Rasa raised his hand, commanding the next move. Magnet release, Shikaku's avatar. With a deafening tremor, a colossal figure resembling a mountain rose beneath the moonlight. The sheer magnitude of the creature shook the ground, and the air itself seemed to tremble with its presence. At that moment, Konoha's sensory shinobi immediately sensed the shift in the atmosphere. "Enemy attack," one shouted. "It's Sunagakure," another cried out. But it was already too late. Shikaku's massive tail, towering high above the battlefield, swung violently, smashing them to chunks of flesh and bones. Magnet release, Sand Shuriken. Rasa called another jutsu. From Shikaku's tail, countless sand shuriken erupted, spinning through the air like a deadly storm. They rained down relentlessly upon the Konoha camp, slicing through tents and shinobi alike. The sound of agony filled the air as screams echoed across the battlefield. "Attack!" Rasa ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. The Sunagakure shinobi surged forward, charging into the disarray of Konoha's ranks without hesitation. "Kill them all!" Pakura and Michikawa shouted, rushing past Rasa to join the fray. But Rasa remained still, waiting for his true opponent. Suddenly, a voice rang out, fierce and commanding. Summoning Jutsu, Toad Shop Collapse. The moonlight was abruptly blocked out by a massive shadow descending from the sky. Rasa's senses, honed by the memories of a transmigrator, immediately recognized the threat. Had he not studied the intelligence on the Sannin earlier that afternoon, Jiraiya's attack might have caught him off guard. But Rasa had been prepared. He had accounted for every potential tactic that the Sannin might employ. Boom! The earth shook as Shikaku's avatar leaped backward with astonishing speed, narrowly avoiding the devastating aerial strike. The massive figure landed with a tremor, standing firm as it evaded the attack. On top of the Toad Gamabunta's head, Jiraiya's eyes narrowed, his expression grim as he realized his strike had missed. At first, when Minato mentioned that the Fourth Kazekage seemed to have extensive knowledge about him, Jiraiya found it difficult to believe. But now, the reality was even more astonishing. This man didn't just understand Minato, he also had an unsettlingly precise understanding of Jiraiya himself. In a shinobi battle, sheer strength alone wasn't enough, intelligence and information were just as vital. Yet, Jiraiya realized he knew next to nothing about this Kazekage. All his knowledge was based on Minato's reports. That meant from the very beginning, he was already at a disadvantage. But there was no time to dwell on this realization. The moment Gamabunta landed on the battlefield, half of his enormous form sank into a massive sand pit, and the quicksand continued to pull him deeper, trapping him further with each passing second. Before Jiraiya could react, Shikaku's enormous tail came sweeping toward the toad. Clang! Gamabunta swiftly drew his twin blades, intercepting the blow. However, the sheer force of the strike was overwhelming, and despite his efforts, Gamabunta's massive body sank even deeper into the sands. Rasa saw the opening and seized the opportunity to strike. Magnet release, Gold Dust Shuriken. A barrage of golden shuriken, dense with magnetic energy, shot toward Gamabunta. Jiraiya, grinning in the face of danger, quickly formed hand seals. Fire release, Giant Flame Bullet. It was a standard fire release technique, but Jiraiya's training at Mount Myaboku had taught him how to refine chakra into oil. With the aid of toad oil, the power of his fire-style jutsu was amplified tenfold. The intense flame shot forward, melting Rasa's gold dust into a river of molten liquid, which rained down from the sky like fiery rain. Not done yet. Jiraiya shouted, his confidence unwavering. Even as the molten gold fell, Jiraiya continued to form hand seals with unerring speed and precision. Fire release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet. 3 additional fire dragons surged from Jiraiya's mouth, encircling the original giant flame. The dragons attacked from the front, left, and right, while the giant flame bullet barreled forward, hitting Rasa head-on. To release 2 jutsus simultaneously with such precision, controlling them as if they were extensions of his own will, was the mark of a true master. The technique was a testament to the skill of the third Hokage's disciple, the legendary ninjutsu professor. Chapter 27, Rasa vs. Jiraiya. Rasa didn't attempt to counter Jiraiya's ninjutsu with his own. There was no point in doing so. Even though Jiraiya hadn't activated Sage Mode, the amplification from the toad oil alone had made his fire release technique several times stronger than normal. Going head-to-head with them would be a disastrous strategy. Magnet release, Shikaku's avatar, Shikaku Impact. Under Rasa's control, the colossal Shikaku construct crossed its arms over its chest, curled its body inward, and wrapped its tail around itself, forming a massive, mountain-sized sphere. With terrifying speed and force, it hurtled toward Jiraiya and Gamabunta like a rolling boulder. Jiraiya's flames had proven powerful, but fire was formless, it had no solid mass to stop a solid object. The gigantic sand sphere barreled forward, unyielding, crushing anything in its path. Jiraiya's reflexes were sharp, and he immediately reacted. Earth release, Swamp of the Underworld. In an instant, the ground beneath the Shikaku construct gave way, and a vast swamp appeared, swallowing the sand sphere whole and rendering it immobile. The massive construct sunk, trapped in the muck. Jiraiya grinned, his confidence returning for a brief moment. Looks like neither of us can move now. But his smile faded as the sand began to stir. The trapped Shikaku's avatar crumbled into countless grains of sand, surging toward Jiraiya like a tidal wave. Violet markings, unmistakable signs of Shikaku's sealing power, began to spread across the sand. Rasa's Shikaku construct wasn't a living entity, it was a massive sand puppet that he could manipulate it at will. The realization hit Jiraiya like a strike to the chest. Rasa's attack wasn't over. Without wasting a second, Jiraiya made a snap decision. You should head back, Gamabunta. He couldn't afford to let Rasa seal Gamabunta again like Gamaken. Poof! With a puff of white smoke, Gamabunta disappeared, and Jiraiya, now airborne, plummeted toward the earth below. Sensing its primary target had vanished, the sand shifted its focus toward Jiraiya. It surged forward with menacing speed, intent on capturing him next. Jiraiya reacted quickly, forming hand seals as the sand closed in on him. Wind release, 1,000 blades of wind. A dense barrage of wind blades sliced through the advancing sand, shredding it into countless fragments. At the same time, the recoil from the wind sent Jiraiya plummeting downward at high speed. He landed lightly on the battlefield, his feet touching the ground with precision. For a moment, Jiraiya couldn't help but echo Minato's earlier words. As expected of the Kazekage. He may be young, but he's just as troublesome as the rest. Despite the mounting pressure, Jiraiya wasn't out of options yet. Minato had mentioned that this Kazekage seemed to avoid close combat whenever possible. It was likely due to his fear of the Flying Thunder God technique, but it also hinted that his taijutsu skills might be lacking. This gave Jiraiya an idea. If he could sneak closer. With a smirk, Jiraiya melded seamlessly into the earth, vanishing from sight. As the scattered sand reassembled, Shikaku's avatar loomed once again over the battlefield. However, standing atop its head, Rasa found himself at a disadvantage. He had lost track of Jiraiya. I can't sense him. Did he use Earth Release? Or a summoning technique? Rasa muttered under his breath. If it had been a normal Earth Release, Rasa would still have been able to detect him. But perhaps Jiraiya had used a sensory blocking technique that Rasa wasn't aware of. Though Rasa had gathered intelligence on Jiraiya, he wasn't foolish enough to rely entirely on second-hand information. After all, this was a real shinobi battle, not just some theoretical scenario. In that case, Rasa's body merged directly with Shikaku's avatar. With such an enormous body, even if Jiraiya could sense his location, the sheer toughness of the Shikaku construct's defenses would make it incredibly difficult for Jiraiya to land a decisive blow. Hidden in the shadows, Jiraiya frowned deeply. TCH, this guy's turtling up like a damn clam. I need to find a way to force him out of that monster. With that thought, a sudden idea struck him. Earth release, tectonic core. In an instant, the ground beneath the Shikaku construct split apart, creating a massive sinkhole. The terrain around it rapidly collapsed, and the colossal sand figure found itself without any solid footing. Unable to maintain balance, Shikaku's avatar plummeted into the enormous pit. Jiraiya saw the opening immediately and revealed himself, springing into action. Earth release, sticky clay technique. Thick, black, viscous clay poured down from above, cascading like a landslide toward the trapped Shikaku's avatar. Let's see how you deal with this. Time to turn your sand into pottery. Fire release, great flame bullet. The combination of sticky clay and intense fire had a clear purpose. By using the clay to bind the sand together and then applying the heat, Jiraiya aimed to bake the sand into a solid, immobile mass. If successful, Rasa's control over the sand would be nullified. As expected of one of the legendary Sannin, Rasa thought, recognizing the threat in the combination of jutsu. He had no choice but to abandon the sand and propel himself out of the pit before the transformation could be completed. And that was exactly what Jiraiya had been waiting for. Ninja art, Wild Lion's mane. In an instant, Jiraiya's white hair extended, growing wildly into a massive lion's head that lunged at Rasa, attempting to ensnare him. This was one of Jiraiya's signature techniques. Against it, Rasa had no effective counter. Though made of hair, the lion's mane was enhanced by chakra, making it incredibly tough and elastic. In terms of raw maneuverability, Jiraiya's hair was even more flexible than Rasa's sand. Furthermore, Wild Lion's mane could be reinforced with fire chakra, increasing its offensive potential. But Rasa could fly. What? Jiraiya's eyes widened in disbelief as Rasa took to the air, effortlessly gliding out of range of the extending Wild Lion's mane. This guy can fly? That's straight up cheating. Jiraiya's hair had grown to immense proportions, but no matter how much control he had over its extension, there was no way it could keep up with Rasa's airborne mobility. His opponent had a distinct advantage. Damn it! Jiraiya thought, frustration mounting. If only I were better at Jinjutsu. Against an opponent like Rasa, long-range battles were a nightmare. If Jiraiya couldn't close the distance, Jinjutsu would have been the ideal counter. But alas, Jinjutsu was one of his weakest areas, and that was a serious flaw. Despite his frustration, Jiraiya didn't forget the bigger picture. Rasa was no ordinary shinobi, he was the Kazekage, a Kage-level threat. Even if Jiraiya could keep up, a drawn-out battle was in Rasa's favor. As long as Rasa played defensively, Jiraiya wouldn't be able to end the fight quickly unless he resorted to his Sage mode. But Jiraiya couldn't afford to waste any more time. Though his attention was on Rasa, Jiraiya could still sense the chaos behind him at the Konoha camp. Things were spiraling out of control. Minato was locked in battle with Pakura, leaving Konoha's lower-ranking shinobi vulnerable to a one-sided slaughter. The situation was dire. No choice. Jiraiya thought, clenching his fists. I'll have to go into Sage mode. He clasped his hands together, preparing to summon Fukasaku and Shima, his trusted Sage partners. Just as he was about to activate Sage mode. But something happened that left him completely stunned. Rasa suddenly charged toward him. Chapter 28, Rasa vs. Jiraiya. Rasa was determined not to let Jiraiya enter Sage mode, and the reason was simple: if Jiraiya activated it, Rasa would be completely outmatched and swiftly defeated. Despite Rasa's position as Kazekage and his formidable power as a Kage-level ninja, along with the enhancements provided by the Kama Seal that absorbed Shikaku's chakra and Star Chakra, pushing him beyond the average Kage level, Jiraiya was already at the peak of Kage-level strength without needing to rely on Sage mode. But if Jiraiya did activate it? That would push him far beyond Kage's level into a realm of power that was simply unreachable for Rasa. At that point, Rasa would have no chance of victory. As it stood, Rasa was already being outclassed by Jiraiya in nearly every aspect, aside from the Jinjutsu he had yet to unleash. In some areas, he was vastly inferior, particularly when it came to summoning jutsu. So, despite the risk, Rasa had to act first. He needed to take the initiative. Jiraiya noticed this move and grinned. Oh? Is he actually closing the distance? To be honest, Jiraiya wasn't confident in his mastery of Sage Mode. Activating it required substantial time to gather natural chakra. Moreover, he usually had to summon the Elder Toads to help maintain it. But after witnessing Gamaken's sealing earlier, Jiraiya was reluctant to rely too much on the Toads. So, when Rasa charged in for a close-quarters fight, Jiraiya felt a wave of relief. This guy, don't tell me he actually understands Sage Mode? Bam! As soon as the two clashed in close combat, Jiraiya instantly confirmed his suspicions. Rasa was terrible at taijutsu. He wasn't even remotely close to Tsunade's level. Which meant Jiraiya didn't need Sage Mode at all. Bam! 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 Their battle shifted from explosive ninjutsu to a brutal melee exchange. In the thick forest, they traded punches and kicks, with Rasa struggling to keep up. The disparity in skill was glaring. While Jiraiya moved with speed, fluidity, and power, Rasa was barely able to react, constantly on the defensive just to stay in the fight. Inevitably, Rasa began to fall behind. Kid, your taijutsu is pathetic. Jiraiya taunted, finding an opening. With a smirk, he landed a powerful kick square into Rasa's abdomen. Unlike Tsunade's immense strength, Jiraiya's raw power was still far beyond most shinobi. Rasa was blasted backward like a ragdoll, crashing through the trees. But Jiraiya quickly noticed something strange. As Rasa hit the ground and regained his footing, he was completely unharmed. Instead of showing signs of injury, cracks formed along his body, from which golden sand began to seep out. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed in realization. A sand armor, huh? Damn, you're just like a damn turtle. He smirked. But how long can you keep this up? Without hesitation, Jiraiya charged forward again. By now, he had a solid understanding of Rasa's taijutsu skills. And now that he knew Rasa's weaknesses, there was no reason to hold back. After all, Jiraiya was a taijutsu master in his own right. His speed was astonishing, so fast that the human eye could barely follow him. In the blink of an eye, Jiraiya closed the gap and was right in front of Rasa, his fist speeding toward his face. But just before the punch landed, a sudden, ominous surge of chakra erupted from Rasa's body. Jiraiya's instincts flared, and he immediately recognized that something was wrong. What? In that instant, Rasa vanished from right in front of him. Jiraiya's reflexes were razor-sharp, and he quickly spun around, already preparing to block the strike coming from behind. Boom! Rasa, now enveloped in star chakra, landed a crushing kick to Jiraiya's arm. The immense force caught Jiraiya off guard, leaving him momentarily stunned. Bang! Jiraiya was sent flying over 100 meters, struggling to dissipate the force in his arm. He regained his footing and looked up, seeing that Rasa had entered a peculiar new form. His body was now wrapped in a dense layer of chakra armor. What happened to his taijutsu? Why is it suddenly so much stronger? Was he pretending to be weak this whole time? No, wait, this is... Jiraiya's mind raced as he recalled an opponent from the past, the third Raikage of Kumogakure, who used the lightning chakra mode. In an instant, Jiraiya realized the source of Rasa's newfound strength. Chakra activation? This is troublesome. Though Jiraiya had encountered similar power boosts before, the surge of power from Rasa was unlike anything he had faced in a while. Still, Rasa also suppressed his excitement. He knew that while the Star Chakra mode provided a temporary increase in strength, it came at a cost. It was fine for short bursts, but prolonged use could seriously damage his body. With no time to waste, Rasa didn't hesitate. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, his figure disappeared from its previous spot. Now, in terms of speed, Rasa was on par with Jiraiya's earlier movements. So fast. Jiraiya muttered under his breath, surprised. He immediately prepared to counter. Thankfully, Jiraiya was no stranger to Tsunade's relentless beatings. So, although Rasa's enhanced physical abilities, thanks to the chakra mode, were now comparable to his own, Jiraiya managed to stay calm and focused. But the situation was becoming increasingly complicated. Jutsu didn't seem to have much effect on Rasa, and now his taijutsu was closing the gap. Jiraiya wasn't particularly skilled in Jinjutsu, and as for chakra, neither of them showed any signs of exhaustion after such a lengthy fight. When it came to summoning beasts, Jiraiya couldn't afford to rely on them either. So the question remained, if Jiraiya attempted to use Sage Mode, would Rasa give him the chance to do so? This is troublesome. At this point, Jiraiya could only hope that Rasa's chakra mode wouldn't last much longer. Meanwhile, back at the Konoha camp, the situation was rapidly worsening. From the moment the Sunagakure ninja launched their surprise attack, the Konohadakure forces had been on the defensive. First, Rasa's Sand Shuriken unleashed widespread destruction, especially impacting the lower-ranked ninjas like Chunins and Genins. While the higher-ranking ninja could dodge the assault, those of lower ranks weren't so fortunate. After Rasa's initial barrage, the Sunagakure ninja kept up their relentless offensive, plunging Konoha's forces into chaos. Minato immediately sprang into action, ready to counterattack, but before he could make his move, a blinding fireball shot toward him. It was Pakura, the Scorch Release user from Sunagakure. Normally, Minato would be in his element when facing a close combat ninja like Pakura. However, her Scorch Release was the perfect counter for someone who preferred close-quarters combat. It had the terrifying ability to evaporate the moisture in a ninja's body upon contact, turning it into a dry, lifeless husk. Minato hadn't yet mastered the Ninetales chakra form or Sage Mode, so he couldn't afford to take her Scorch Release lightly. Moreover, Minato sensed that Pakura was highly familiar with his techniques. His Flying Thunder God technique was useless against her, and using Rasengan to finish her off was no longer an option. Feeling a sense of helplessness, Minato had no idea that Pakura was more nervous than he was at that moment. Pakura now understood why Rasa held the blonde-haired ninja in such high regard. The Flying Thunder God technique was a space-time ninjutsu, and it was far more terrifying than she had anticipated. The sheer speed of Minato's near-instantaneous space jumps made him a deadly opponent. Had it not been for Rasa's intel, she would have been killed multiple times over by now. At this point, Pakura was pouring all of her energy into facing Minato. I can't let this go on. As a proud shinobi of Sunagakure, she refused to let herself fail. If, before today, she had felt overwhelmed by Minato's skills, now she had found a way to overcome him. She had Rasa to thank for giving her the power and the peacock mystic art the day before. Suddenly, a remark Rasa had made to her and Michikawa earlier flashed in her mind. The future of the village. In that case, I'll go all in. With resolve in her heart, she formed a series of hand seals. Scorch Release Chakra Mode. Chapter 29, Scorch Release vs. Flying Thunder God. In the blink of an eye, Pakura's chakra surged with incredible force. A violent, howling wind whipped around her, and her body became engulfed in a vibrant, swirling blue chakra. As the chakra intensified, it shifted to a searing red, as if it had been set ablaze. In that moment, Pakura transformed into a figure wreathed in flames, radiating an overwhelming heat that scorched everything in her vicinity. The trees and the earth around her were rapidly blackened and withered by the intense warmth. This extraordinary display immediately seized the attention of everyone on the battlefield. The Sand Ninja watched in awe, their eyes wide with admiration, while the Leaf Ninja looked on in apprehension, fear evident in their expressions. Stay back. I can't control this power fully yet. Pakura yelled, warning the surrounding ninja. The Sand Ninja, responding without hesitation, swiftly retreated about a mile from her, careful not to get caught in her destructive aura. "What is this?" Jiraiya muttered, his attention diverted from his fight with Rasa as he noticed the sudden change. With his vast experience, Jiraiya recognized the transformation instantly. This is exactly the same technique the Kazekage used earlier. But what kind of power is this? Could it be a secret technique of Sunagakure? Rasa, too, was stunned, his eyes narrowing in recognition. Impressive. She's a prodigy, developing Scorch Release entirely on her own. In just half a day, she has managed to perfectly merge Star Chakra Mode, Peacock Mystic Art, and Scorch Release to create this terrifying form? The sight brought a familiar memory to Rasa's mind, a powerful vision of the Lava Release Chakra Mode used by the four-tailed beast Jinchuriki. Minato also couldn't help but think of Kushina Uzumaki, the nine-tails Jinchuriki of Konoha, whenever he saw such a transformation. The image of the tailed beast cloak, she would assume when tapping into the full power of the nine-tails, was vividly imprinted in his memory. Now, boosted by the Scorch Release Chakra Mode, Pakura's speed and strength were pushed to their absolute limits, enabling her to close the distance toward Minato in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! Minato responded by hurling a kunai, testing her reflexes, but Pakura merely twisted her face into a sneer. Her speed had become so refined and fluid that she effortlessly dodged the thrown kunai. As for defense, she no longer needed it. In the Scorch Release Chakra Mode, any attempt Minato made to approach her would result in instant evaporation, leaving him as nothing more than a dry, desiccated husk. Boom! With her absolute defense and terrifying offensive power, Pakura was no longer just a force to be reckoned with, she had become a relentless killing machine, cutting a path through the battlefield. Every Konoha ninja who crossed her path stood no chance, their bodies reduced to dry husks as they screamed in agony. Minato's expression darkened, his mind racing for a solution as he couldn't afford to let Pakura restlessly massacre his comrades. There's no choice now. It looks like I'll have to use this technique. Minato muttered to himself with a resolve. This was Minato's last resort, a trump card he had hoped never to use. He wasn't even certain it would succeed, but with the current situation, he had no other option. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In an instant, two identical Minato appeared beside him, their expressions determined. "Please," one clone said, while the other added, "Leave it to us." Without wasting a moment, both clones immediately began to form Razengans, their energy swirling around them as they charged toward Pakura. By now, Pakura had observed the Rasengan enough in battle to recognize the technique's deadly potential. She had to admit that the technique was undeniably powerful. She likely couldn't withstand its impact even in her current Scorch Release Chakra Mode. However, she knew that she would be fine if it didn't hit her directly. With this thought, she immediately unleashed two fireballs, propelling them toward the two clones. Boom! Pakura blinked in surprise as the unexpectedly weak clones were hit directly by her Scorch Release. They exploded into smoke almost instantly. Just as she realized what had happened, a flying thunder god kunai came hurtling toward her face. Annoyed, Pakura muttered. This kind of distraction is too obvious. Minato had used the flying thunder god technique to appear right in front of her. Without hesitation, she charged at him, determined not to give him the chance to complete his Rasengan. Her only goal was to evaporate him into a dry husk before he could react. But in that very instant, Minato formed a strange hand seal. A sudden sense of unease surged in Pakura's heart. Before her eyes, as she closed in on Minato, a strange barrier appeared in front of her. Her body suddenly felt disoriented, and everything around her began to blur. In the midst of her confusion, a bright light flickered at the corner of her vision. In panic, she whipped around and saw Minato, holding a Rasengan, descending from the sky, heading straight for her back. From a distance, another Minato stood, holding a flying thunder god kunai. In that split second, everything clicked in Pakura's mind. She realized the truth. The flying thunder god technique didn't just teleport the user, it could also teleport the target. Damn it! Just as she braced for the impact of Minato's Rasengan, convinced the technique would succeed, another blinding light flashed before their eyes. Both Pakura and Minato froze, stunned, as Rasa appeared between them, holding a Rasengan of his own. Boom! The two Rasengans collided in an explosive eruption, shaking the battlefield and destroying everything in its immediate vicinity. Minato's clone vanished instantly into smoke. How is this possible? Minato asked in disbelief, his hand still gripping the flying thunder god kunai. His pupils dilated in shock as he stared at the Rasengan in Rasa's hands. This was the very technique Minato had developed to protect Kushina, so how was it that Rasa, the Kazekage of Sunigakure, was also capable of using it? The shock was also felt by Jiraiya, who stood some distance away, witnessing the unexpected turn of events. As he recalled Rasa's deep knowledge of their team's strategies, an unsettling thought began to take root in both his and Minato's minds. Did someone in our village betray us? How else would the Sand Village know our tactics so thoroughly? Jiraiya thought out loud, he narrowed his eyes with concern. No matter what, this battle can't continue. Jiraiya urged his disciple. Since the enemy has a lot of information relating to them, far more than they had imagined, a continuation of this battle will escalate further complications. We need to retreat, Minato. At this point, we have no chance of winning. Minato nodded solemnly, his gaze locked on Rasa. The Kazekage of Sunigakure had left a permanent mark on Minato's mind. The events of this day would be something he would never forget. On the other side, after the explosion, Pakura found herself in Rasa's arms, having dispelled her scorch-release chakra mode. She stared at him, her expression one of shock and disbelief. Her emotions were a whirlwind, she had never imagined she would be saved by Rasa. Sensing the awkwardness of their position, Pakura struggled to break free from Rasa's embrace with a hue of redness on her face, her voice tentative as she stammered. Thank you. Rasa, ever calm, responded with a steady voice. There's no need for thanks. We're comrades from the same village. How are you feeling? Pakura's eyes flickered, and she inhaled deeply to steady herself. Her scorch-release chakra mode flared back into existence, her voice gradually regaining its usual firmness. Don't worry. I was just caught off guard by a sneak attack. It won't happen again. Rasa nodded thoughtfully. Given Rasa's speed, it should have been impossible for him to keep up with Minato's flying thunder god technique. Even though Rasa, as the Kazekage, was highly skilled with teleportation techniques, he couldn't have possibly kept up with such an advanced space-time ninjutsu. But, knowing Minato well, Rasa had anticipated his actions. From the moment Minato had used the Shadow Clone Jutsu, Rasa had sensed something was amiss. After all, Minato wasn't like Naruto, he wasn't a chakra powerhouse, and he rarely used the multi-shadow clone jutsu. This meant that Minato was likely planning something, and Rasa had picked up on that immediately. When Rasa noticed that Minato had created another clone after the explosion distraction, he made his move. Seizing the opportunity while Jiraiya's attention was diverted by Pakura's scorch-release mode, Rasa rushed toward Minato's clone, knowing that he needed to act quickly. Rasa didn't reveal to Pakura that Minato's Flying Thunder God technique had the ability to teleport other people, as he needed to maintain the illusion that his intellect was the key to his success, rather than an uncanny ability to predict the future. Next, Rasa began to warn Pakura to be cautious, but the battlefield shifted in an instant. Retreat! The Konoha ninjas suddenly began pulling back, their withdrawal signaling the end of the battle. Chapter 30, Planned Success. The retreat of the Konoha ninjas was carried out with military precision. First, the Jonin fell back, followed closely by the Chunin. The Jonin, with their heightened skills, were tasked with holding off the advancing Sunigakure ninjas to give the others time to retreat. The last to cover the withdrawal were Jiraiya and Minato, ensuring the safety of the retreating forces. As the Konoha ninjas began their organized retreat, the Sunigakure ninjas initially celebrated their apparent victory. The tension in the air began to lift, and all eyes turned to Rasa, awaiting his next instructions. Michikawa appeared before Rasa in the blink of an eye. It seems like we've won. Should we pursue them? Rasa shook his head. No need. We'll only overextend ourselves if we pursue them too far into the land of fire. It wouldn't be in our best interest. Michikawa nodded in understanding. From the outset, the purpose of this war had been crystal clear to Sunagakure. They hadn't intended to engage in a prolonged conflict with Konoha. What they truly sought was the wealth of the Land of Fire. With that objective in mind, this war's actual victory was almost secondary. However, despite this, certain formalities still had to be observed to maintain the appearance of a legitimate conquest. Though Rasa, Pakura, and Michikawa knew the real reason for the war, many of the Sunagakure ninjas were in the dark. Only the Jonin were aware of the true purpose, as they were the only ones capable of keeping such a secret. To maintain this secrecy, Rasa knew he had to formally conclude the operation for everyone involved. Rasa stepped forward and addressed the gathered Sunagakure forces, his voice carrying the weight of authority. To all the Sand Shinobi. In the name of the Kazekage, I declare that the victors of the first war between Sunagakure and Konoha are Sunagakure. Oh! The crowd erupted in a roar of cheers and excitement, the sound of victory reverberating through the air. But we must not let our guard down. We must remain vigilant against any counterattacks from Konoha. As long as Konoha refuses to hand over the killer of the Third Kazekage, this war will not be over. Oh! The cheer rose again, this time louder and more determined, as the Sunagakure ninjas rallied around Rasa's words. On the Konoha side, the retreating ninjas could still hear the distant cheers of Sunagakure from behind them. The sounds carried through the air, heavy with the weight of their apparent victory. Their faces were somber, but beneath the grim expressions, there was also a sense of relief. They were thankful that Sunagakure had not pursued them. Minato, his usual composure shattered, wore a dejected expression as he trudged alongside Jiraiya. Seeing his disheartened disciple, Jiraiya placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, Minato. It's common to face both victories and defeats on the battlefield. What matters now is reporting everything back to the village and waiting for the old man's decision. The Konoha ninjas did not make their way directly back to the village. Instead, they retreated 100 kilometers, setting up a temporary camp after ensuring that it was safe. They needed time to regroup and assess their situation. Once Jiraiya and Minato delivered their report to Konoha, they received a grim response. The village had no additional resources to spare to deal with Sunagakure. In fact, the situation was even more dire than anticipated. Minato and Jiraiya, already battle-weary, were reassigned to the front lines to face Iwagakure's forces. In the past few days, Konoha had been embroiled in an intense war with Iwagakure. To make matters worse, two of Iwagakure's Jinchuriki, old enemies of both Jiraiya and Minato, had appeared on the battlefield, further complicating the situation. Within Konoha, besides the third Hokage, only Jiraiya and Minato had the experience and ability to deal with the power of these two formidable Jinchuriki. Meanwhile, Danzo, though politically savvy, lacked the military expertise required to command on the battlefield. To fill their roles, Konoha had sent Shikaku Nara, a brilliant strategist from the Nara clan. His mission was clear: stall Sunagakure's advance as much as possible. Shikaku's assignment initially seemed daunting. However, when he arrived at the front lines, he was surprised to find that Sunagakure's actions were unusually restrained. It appeared, as Minato had warned, that Sunagakure had no intention of launching a full-scale attack. So, what is Sunagakure really plotting? Is it truly just about revenge? Despite his brilliance, he could not fully grasp Sunagakure's true intentions at this stage. 2 days later, in Sunagakure's camp, Rasa gathered Michikawa, Pakura, and Yura for a final briefing. It's done. Our mission has been completed, and we can begin preparations for retreat, Rasa announced, his tone resolute. Pakura, however, seemed hesitant. Her voice carried an edge of frustration. Just retreat like this? We've seized such a huge opportunity. Konoha is at its weakest right now. If we just Rasa interrupted her, not out of anger but with the calm authority that came from his experience. He understood her sentiment. It echoed in the hearts of many, particularly among those in positions of power who saw the fleeting moments of weakness in their enemies. Don't let temporary gains cloud your judgment. The strength of Sunagakure is the most important thing. Look at the situation. Aside from Kiridakure and us, every other village is embroiled in war. This is the perfect time for us to surpass them. If we join this conflict now, we risk losing too many of our own comrades for little gain. The only ones who would benefit are the daimyo, Reikage, and Tsuchikage. Michikawa nodded in agreement. Kazekage-sama is right. The benefits we've gained are already significant. We should not risk it all for something that would only prolong the conflict. Pakura, still clearly reluctant, paused and took a deep breath. She suppressed her dissatisfaction and eventually nodded in understanding. Understood. Rasa, seeing the tension ease, continued with the next set of instructions. Now, according to our plan, the Chunin will retreat first, followed by the Jonin. Lastly, the three of us will cover the rear. During the retreat, the Chunin and Jonin will not head directly back to the village. Instead, they will rendezvous with Maki and Elder Ebizo to help wrap up the aftermath. Sunagakure's gains from this operation are substantial, and we need to ensure everything is accounted for. At this, Michikawa and Pakura exchanged a glance, both filled with quiet anticipation, understanding the gravity of the situation. Yura, you'll be responsible for contacting Maki and coordinating the arrangements. Rasa instructed. Yes, Kazekage-sama. Yura responded promptly. Good. This operation has been taxing on everyone. All participating ninjas can return to the village for some much-needed rest. As for defending against Konoha's possible counterattack, Yura, please contact Lady Chiyo and ask her to send the puppet forces. Considering their battles on multiple fronts, I don't expect Konoha to bother with us right now, but we must remain cautious. Rasa's calm and calculated approach brought a sense of relief to the group. Indeed, with Konoha distracted by multiple wars, the idea of Sunagakure retreating would likely ease their worries. Rasa's voice softened slightly, but his words remained resolute. The success of this plan is thanks to the hard work and sacrifices of everyone in the village. When we return, the village will not forget what was done here. All right, that's all I have to say. Let's begin preparations for the retreat. The retreat of Sunagakure was executed with quiet precision and efficiency. It wasn't until half a day later that the Konoha sentries, stationed at a safe distance, noticed the eerie silence emanating from the Sunagakure camp. The ninja who first noticed the anomaly immediately reported it to Shikaku. Originally, Shikaku's strategy had been to avoid any provocation, ensuring Konoha ninjas stayed at a distance from Sunagakure's camp to prevent giving them an excuse to engage in combat. But the sudden quietude raised suspicion, prompting him to reconsider and take a more proactive approach. Soon after, Konoha ninjas were dispatched to investigate. They confirmed that Sunagakure's camp had become unsettlingly empty, adding a layer of confusion to the situation. What was Sunagakure planning? First, they launched a swift invasion, only to retreat just as suddenly. The question hung in the air, unanswered and troubling. 2 days later, Konoha received reports from multiple cities, Moriyama, Manabu, Daiwa, and others across 17 towns. It was then that the full scope of the situation became clear. The Land of Fire's daimyo, seething with anger, had received word of Sunagakure's sudden withdrawal. Enraged by the loss of valuable resources, the daimyo issued a direct command to Konoha, an immediate offensive to reclaim everything Sunagakure had taken from the cities. However, by that point, Konoha's resources were stretched thin. The ongoing wars with Kumogakure and Iwagakure had depleted the village's strength, leaving little capacity to address the situation with Sunagakure. Konoha was caught in a precarious position, struggling to balance the demands of multiple fronts while the threat of Sunagakure's unexpected maneuver loomed large. Chapter 31, Aftermath. In the vast desert, the land of wind, Sunagakure. 7 days could be seen as neither long nor short, but for the villagers of Sunagakure, it had been the most extraordinary 7 days of their lives. 7 days ago, as they watched the ninjas depart from the village and witnessed the lockdown being implemented, an unsettling feeling began to grow among the villagers. Was war about to break out? No one welcomed war, for it was followed by death. This death could be that of a wife's husband, a child's parent, or the elder's son. But 3 days ago, something unexpected and miraculous began to unfold. There was no news of death. No reports of husbands, parents, or children being lost. Instead, an unbroken procession of carts, laden with goods, began to pour into Sunagakure. Though the lockdown prevented them from verifying the exact contents of the carts, rumors had already begun to spread throughout the village. According to eyewitness accounts, the carts were filled with all manner of goods. Among them were money, food, cloth, salt, iron, sugar, medicine, silver, gold, and jewels in unimaginable quantities. It was even said that the village warehouses had accumulated a stockpile high as mountains. For the past 3 days, the influx of carts had been unceasing. This left the villagers confused. Weren't the ninjas supposed to be engaged in war? Why did it seem as though they were involved in a massive trade operation instead? So, after 7 days had passed, when the first group of genin returned safely to the village, the villagers, overjoyed to see their loved ones safe and sound, began to piece together the story behind the goods. Incredible, this was the villagers' first reaction. Then came the exhilaration. As citizens of Sunagakure, they understood all too well the significance of these goods. This meant that their loved ones would no longer need to risk their lives merely to survive. The scarcity of resources that had plagued them for so long would no longer stifle the growth of Sunagakure. And the growth of Sunagakure would usher in endless prosperity. Who wouldn't desire wealth? Certainly, no one. When the ninjas who returned later explained that this entire operation had been orchestrated by the Fourth Kazekage, the villagers were left even more astounded. Though some ninjas had perished during the mission, no one questioned whether it had been worth the cost, considering the immense wealth gained with so little loss. Nearly 2 days later, all the ninjas returned to the village. Among them were Rasa, Pakura, and Michikawa. Rasa did not rush to assemble everyone for a debriefing of the mission's outcome. Instead, he granted everyone a day of rest. This decision filled the entire village with a sense of jubilation. Especially the ninjas who had participated in the operation. They eagerly awaited their rewards, knowing the operation's success would bring significant personal gain. The following day, once again at the Kazekage building, all the high-ranking ninjas of the village had gathered. However, unlike the previous time when Rasa arrived to hear numerous complaints, this time, no one voiced any grievances or displayed discontent. Instead, their tone was filled with nothing but joy and deep acknowledgement of Rasa's role as the Kazekage. It could be said that, with this daring raid on Konoha, Rasa had firmly cemented an unshakable authority in the hearts of every ninja in Sunagakure. Rasa, too, was punctual this time. As soon as the sun rose, after gathering everyone, he arrived at the Kazekage Tower with Baki by his side. Kazekage-sama. At once, all the jonin, with the exception of Chiyo, Ebizo, Pakura, and Michikawa, instinctively knelt halfway to the ground, bowing in reverence. The 4 high-ranking officials observed, fully aware that Rasa had solidified his position as the Kazekage without question. Amid the crowd, Rasa took his seat as Kazekage and spoke calmly. "Please rise." Everyone worked hard during this mission. It was no hardship, Kazekage-sama. You are the one who worked tirelessly. That's right. Without your plan, Kazekage-sama, how could we have achieved such outstanding results? The ninjas below spoke one after another, their words a stark contrast to the rebellious attitude they had once displayed. Rasa knew exactly what they were expecting, so he wasted no time with pleasantries. Baki! Yes, Kazekage-sama. From this point forward, I will issue the rewards for everyone in the village, in the name of the Kazekage. Understood! At this, every ninja's eyes turned eagerly to Rasa. First, For all the ninjas who participated in this mission, Genin will be rewarded in line with C-rank mission standards, Chunin with B-ranked, Jonin with A-ranked, and the two elders, as well as Pakura and Michikawa, will receive S-ranked mission rewards. All rewards will be given at the highest standards. Understood! The room immediately erupted in cheers of joy. They all knew these rewards would be nothing short of substantial. According to Rasa's announcement, Genin would receive 100,000 Ryo, Chunin 200,000 Ryo, Jonin 1 million Ryo, and the elite members would receive 5 million Ryo each. Such rewards were almost unheard of in the past, especially in times of war when resources were scarce. But the surprises weren't over. Second, starting today, all ninjas in the village will have their salaries increased by 50%. This was yet another point of distinction between Sunagakure and Konoha. Konoha ninjas didn't receive salaries because they were able to sustain themselves through missions. Unfortunately, this was not the case for Sunagakure's ninjas. This was largely due to the prosperity of the Land of Fire, where most of the wealthy individuals who could issue missions resided. Thanks to Konoha's fame, people from other nations generally sought to post missions there, except for specialized tasks. As a result, Konoha controlled over 80% of the shinobi world's market. Sunagakure, in contrast, faced a more difficult situation. Its geographical location made it nearly impossible for others to send missions, as the desert stood between them and other regions. Without missions to sustain them, Sunagakure's ninjas had no choice but to rely on salaries. When Rasa finished speaking, everyone was grinning with satisfaction. Although these ninjas were Jonin, the highest rank among ninjas, and typically wouldn't be troubled by financial concerns, who could resist the allure of more wealth? So, what do you think? Are you satisfied with these rewards? When the Jonin heard this, they understood that the rewards for them had now concluded. Though their share was just a small fraction of the overall gains, they were already thoroughly content. "Thank you, Kazekage-sama," they all exclaimed in unison. Rasa nodded with approval, then turned his gaze toward Chiyo, Ebizo, Pakura, and Michikawa. Through Sasori, Rasa had already secured leverage over both Chiyo and Ebizo. Thanks to the success of this mission, he had managed to shift Pakura and Michikawa's perceptions of him. As a result, none of the four held any objections this time. Alright, now for the third matter. You all witnessed the great battle outside. The power of Konoha is far beyond what Sunagakure can currently match. Rasa paused, letting his words settle in. So, I've decided that, from now on, we will take full advantage of this period of chaos to strengthen and expand Sunagakure. Chapter 32, Development Plan. Next. A profound silence fell over the Kazekage's office. It wasn't that the attendees disagreed with the Kazekage's words, rather, they were unsure how to proceed. The atmosphere was thick with contemplation. Breaking the silence, Ebizo, who had come to respect Rasa after their recent mission, spoke up with a question. "May I ask, Kazekage-sama, what are your plans moving forward?" Rasa surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on each person before he responded, his voice steady and deliberate. For a ninja village, the number of ninjas is the most crucial factor. Over the years, Sunagakure has struggled to match Konoha's ninja school system. Although we've tried to adopt a similar model, the lack of funds has hindered our progress. We have never been able to ensure that all capable children can attend the ninja school as Konoha does. But now, the situation is different. After the explanation, Rasa surveyed his gazes over the people present in the office. Who is currently in charge of the education department? Though Rasa clearly knew the answer, he asked the question to reaffirm his authority as Kazekage. A seemingly gentle-hearted Jonin stood up, addressing him respectfully. "It's me, Kazekage-sama. I am Gashima, the head of the education department, responsible for overseeing the ninja school in the village." Gashima. From now on, I need you to develop a plan. If you're uncertain, you can follow Konoha's example. My request is simple: from this moment forward, any child in the village who is of the appropriate age and capable of channeling chakra must attend the ninja school. I want tuition and other associated fees to be waived as much as possible. Understood, Kazekage-sama. I will begin preparations immediately upon my return. Gashima responded. Good. Rasa acknowledged, then paused for a moment before issuing another instruction. The entry requirements for the ninja school can be relaxed. As long as the children are capable of refining chakra, it's acceptable if they don't have the inherent talent to perform ninjutsu. We can focus on training them in taijutsu instead. Rasa's mind recalled a famous taijutsu ninja from Sunigakure, whose name he couldn't quite remember but whose martial art style had been akin to the Eight Gates of Death. This individual had eventually become Gaara's disciple. Even if no such individual existed now, Rasa had received the Peacock Mystic Arts Hashigakure. The technique did not require chakra attributes, and he could adapt it for taijutsu training in the future. I understand, Kazekage-sama. I'll pass on your orders immediately. Rasa nodded again, signaling his satisfaction. Seeing that no one else had any objections or further questions, Rasa continued. In addition to the ninja school, we must also revise the village's pension system. Who is currently in charge of that? A ninja with a scar on his face, exuding an intimidating presence, stepped forward. It's me, Kazekage-sama. I am Ruji, the head of the logistics department. I oversee the distribution of ninja salaries and the care of orphans left behind by fallen ninjas. The ninjas who sacrifice their lives for the village are heroes, and the village must not neglect their families. So, starting today, you are to devise a comprehensive plan for the pension system to ensure that the families of these heroes are well cared for. The village is no longer lacking in funds, so do not hesitate to think big. Understood, Kazekage-sama. Ruji responded, his tone firm and resolute. Rasa's words stirred the room, motivating everyone present. After all, as ninjas, none of them could guarantee their safety on the battlefield. Rasa's assurances alleviated their concerns for the future. Furthermore, the village needs to establish a thorough system for orphan adoption. This should include not only orphans within the village but also children who have lost their parents due to the ravages of war. Our village can adopt them as well. Everyone immediately understood Rasa's intent. To build a strong village, one must cultivate a sense of belonging among its youth. And there was no group easier to nurture than the orphans displaced by conflict. Understood, Kazekage-sama. They all responded in unison. Aside from education, pensions, and orphan care, we also fall behind Konoha in the medical field. Konoha boasts a complete system of medical ninjas, with every ninja team having at least one member skilled in medical ninjutsu. This is why Konoha's ninjas tend to survive longer in battle. Our village also has a medical department, but it is still too rudimentary compared to Konoha. Who is in charge of the medical department here? A busted female ninja dressed in purple clothing stepped forward, respectfully kneeling. It's me, Kazekage-sama. I am Iris, the head of the medical department. I am responsible for overseeing the medical ninjas in the village. And, yeah, I know it doesn't fit the Japanese setting, but remember, names like Killer Bee exist. Good. I plan to expand the medical department. While we may not reach the level of Konoha, we cannot afford to fall too far behind. Please prepare a detailed plan. Iris felt a surge of excitement. As a medical nin, with a healer's heart, she was deeply pleased to see the Kazekage prioritizing the well-being of the village's ninjas. However, she had a question. Excuse me, Kazekage-sama. There is one limitation to expanding the medical ninja force, aside from funding. The biggest hurdle is the lack of high-level medical ninjutsu. At present, our medical ninjas rely on basic medicines to treat injured ninjas, and they are powerless against many injuries caused by ninjutsu. Is that so? Rasa mused, thinking carefully. Indeed, Konoha's medical system had developed to its current state largely due to Tsunade's genius in medical ninjutsu. However, Sunigakure. Rasa glanced at Chiyo, who seemed to be deep in thought. Chiyo-sama, you are likely the most skilled in medical ninjutsu in the village. Therefore, I'll need your assistance in helping Iris resolve this issue, he said. Chio snapped out of her reverie. In the past, she might have used her age as an excuse to decline such a request, but now she nodded in agreement. I understand. With Chio's approval, Iris's excitement grew even more. Thank you, Chio-sama, Iris exclaimed, her gratitude evident. With that, the main changes in the village's administration were settled. Although Sunagakure had gained unimaginable wealth from this mission, Rasa knew that money could easily dwindle if not spent wisely, so the village had to remain cautious in its spending. Next, I want to discuss something crucial for the future of our village, although it will take a considerable amount of time to achieve. Rasa continued, drawing everyone's attention once more. As you all know, the biggest obstacle to the development of our village has always been the harsh environment in which we are located. His words caused a collective sigh of helplessness among the ninjas in the room. But we have no choice. When the first Kazekage decided to establish Sunagakure here, it was because this location was the best option available at the time. Now, with no alternatives, we must find solutions ourselves. To be honest, I don't have a perfect answer, but I will share two ideas, and we can brainstorm together. First, there is the issue of transportation. Our village's harsh environment makes it extremely difficult for people from other countries to come here to issue missions. They have to cross the vast desert, which is too challenging for ordinary people. This is one of the primary reasons our village has remained impoverished. Therefore, I hope everyone can use their intellect to come up with a solution. Anyone who presents a feasible idea will be generously rewarded by the village. Rasa turned to his most trusted ally, the head of Umbuz. Baki, please announce this to the village and gather everyone's ideas. Reward those who contribute, no matter how practical or impractical the suggestions may seem. Understood, Kazekage-sama, Baki replied. Additionally, aside from the transportation issue, there is another problem with the village's environment. While we can't change the entire land of wind, we can improve the area surrounding Sunagakure. Planting more trees, for example, could help. This is something the common people can contribute to. However, as ninjas, I want you to think of other ways to improve the environment. Just like with the transportation issue, whether the ideas come from you or the civilians, anyone who comes up with a workable solution will be rewarded. Rasa's voice grew more resolute as he continued. Everyone, the future of the village is in our hands. I hope we can all work together to restore the glory of Sunagakure, as it was during the time of the second Kazekage. Chapter 33, Transfer of Power. The era of the second Kazekage's reign was arguably the most prosperous period in Sunagakure's history. During this time, the village boasted a powerhouse of ninjas. The second Kazekage himself, Chio, Ebizo, and Bunpuku were all in their prime, while the younger generation, including the future third Kazekage and Sasori's parents, had also grown into formidable warriors. Furthermore, Sunagakure made significant strides in research on Shikaku, which led to the development of various secret techniques. For the first time, the village felt confident enough to challenge Konoha. However, the second Kazekage's health gradually deteriorated due to years of exposure to Shikaku's chakra. Sasori's parents were killed by Tsukumo Hatake, and the Second Great Ninja War ended in a crushing defeat for Sunagakure. As a result, the village plummeted from its prosperous heights into a period of despair. Because of these events, many in the present-day village still look back fondly on the era of the second Kazekage. Many of the current Jonin had risen to prominence during that time. Upon hearing Rasa's words, a few of them couldn't help but show nostalgic expressions. Their eyes turned toward him, filled with a glimmer of hope. Could Sunagakure really return to the glory days of the second Kazekage? Rasa didn't linger on his words, having already shared his thoughts. Now, the responsibility fell on everyone else to take action. With that, Rasa had covered all the main issues concerning the village's affairs. The other Jonin no longer needed to stay. All right, Chio-sama, Ebizo-sama, Pakura, Michikawa, and Baki, please remain. The rest can disperse. Yes. The others responded as they began to leave, and soon, the Kazekage's office was quiet again. Now, only a handful of people remained, and their expressions were complicated. On one hand, they deeply hoped that everything Rasa had discussed could come to fruition. But on the other hand, a sense of uncertainty lingered in their hearts. Sunagakure was still far too weak at this moment. It stood near the bottom among the 5 great ninja villages, which left little room for confidence. However, Rasa appeared undeterred by these doubts, so he asked for their opinions. "Do any of you have any issues with my arrangements?" Chiyo, Pakura, and Michikawa remained silent. Only Ebizo spoke up, offering his approval. "Kazekage-sama, your arrangements are excellent. I have no objections." Rasa acknowledged. Since no one else voiced any concerns, he took it as a silent agreement from everyone. "Baki, now you can share the details of the funds we've acquired from this operation with the 2 elders, Pakura and Michikawa." Baki, visibly excited, quickly recited the numbers he had memorized. "Report, Kazekage-sama. According to the Umbu's statistics, the funds we've gained from this operation, just in terms of currency alone, total 7.9 billion ryo. This amount exceeds Sunagakure's military budget for the past 10 years. Additionally, we've acquired 179 million pounds of grain, which is enough to feed 100,000 people in Sunagakure for 5 years. We also have cloth, salt, iron, sugar, and medicine that will meet our needs for the next decade. As for silver, gold, jewels, and antiques, the amount is incalculable." The 4 people present were left speechless as they processed the staggering figures. Although they had anticipated a significant harvest, the actual outcome was far beyond what they had imagined. Rasa, already aware of the figures, didn't show much surprise. Instead, he calmly issued further instructions. "Jewels and antiques hold little value for us. Quickly convert them into items the village needs. I'm sure the nobility of the Land of Wind would be quite interested in these treasures from the Land of Fire." He paused for a moment, then added, "Gold and silver, however, remain valuable currency in this world." "Understood, Kazekage-sama." Baki responded immediately, his eyes gleaming with inspiration as he nodded enthusiastically. Rasa then scanned the faces of those present, his gaze sharp and commanding. "I intend for the Umbu to manage these items and funds. Does anyone have any objections?" Chiyo and Ebizo remained silent, but Pakura and Michikawa both raised their heads, frowning slightly. As ninjas, they were indifferent about who controlled the funds. After all, in positions like theirs, money was never an issue. However, they represented not only themselves but also the elder factions within the commoners and nobility behind them. Before they could voice their concerns, Chiyo, who had been lost in thought earlier, suddenly asked, "Did the 3rd Kazekage truly die at the hands of Konoha's Danzo?" The unexpected shift in conversation left everyone momentarily stunned. Baki and Ebizo, both more aware of the situation, subtly shifted their expressions. Rasa responded simply but firmly, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The 3rd Kazekage could only have been killed by Konoha's Danzo, and it must have been him. The intelligence of the people present was evident. Moreover, they understood the importance of this statement. For the sake of the village's unity and stability, the villain behind the 3rd Kazekage's death had to be Danzo of Konoha. Chiyo, understanding Rasa's meaning, felt a sense of relief in her heart. She gazed at him and nodded. "I understand. I have no objections to your arrangements, Kazekage-sama. As for the puppet brigade, I am getting old, so please find someone else to take over for me." Her words sent a ripple of shock through the room. She was essentially stepping down, handing over her power to Rasa, the 4th Kazekage. This was a clear transition of authority, marking the solidification of Rasa's position as Kazekage. Rasa was momentarily taken aback. While he had planned to take control of the puppet brigade, after reflecting on the matter, he decided to decline for now. "No. Chiyo-sama, we currently lack anyone in the village who can manage the puppet brigade effectively, so I kindly ask that you continue to lead it for the time being." Also, given the large sum of funds we've acquired, I believe it's important to ensure transparency in their use. Therefore, I would like to invite 2 elders to oversee the process. Chiyo met Rasa's gaze and saw the seriousness in his eyes. After a brief moment of silence, she nodded in agreement, her decision resolute. She had no intention of refusing, knowing that everything she did now was for her grandson, Sasori, to atone for his past actions. Rasa had shown his sincerity, doing everything he could to cover for Sasori's transgressions. With her consent, Ebizo, as her younger brother, naturally had no objections. At this point, Pakura and Michikawa, realizing the weight of Chiyo and Ebizo's authority, had no choice but to remain silent. The 2 of them held far too much influence within the village. In comparison, the elites like Pakura and Michikawa seemed almost insignificant. However, Rasa wasn't being overly harsh. He broke the silence with a clear, practical solution. Baki, take 500 million ryo from the funds we've gained and give it to Pakura and Michikawa as a reward for their involvement in this operation. How the money would be divided between them was left to Pakura and Michikawa. The 2 of them exchanged looks, relieved to know they wouldn't be empty-handed. This sum was generous. For context, the annual military budget from the daimyo for Sunagakure was only 600 million ryo, so this reward would be enough to appease the old factions behind them. With the money issue resolved, the next pressing matter was brought up by Rasa, who continued without hesitation. Now that the financial matter is handled, we need to address the problem of manpower. The reason Konoha is so much stronger than us is because they possess numerous bloodline limits and secret techniques. But what do we have in Sunagakure? Apart from Magnet Release and Pakura's Scorch Release, I can't think of anything else noteworthy. And while we have summoning beasts, these are not enough. These are the problems we need to resolve. The others exchanged concerned looks, their brows furrowed. Pakura, ever the experienced one, spoke first. This won't be easy. Developing secret techniques is no simple feat. Rasa nodded in agreement. That's true in theory, but this world doesn't always follow reason. Pakura raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Rasa didn't hesitate to reveal his thoughts. I've received intelligence that the third Mizukage of Kirigakure is displeased with the clans possessing bloodline limits in his village, and he may take action against them. This presents an opportunity for us in Sunagakure. Chapter 34, Seizing the Mizukage. Everyone immediately grasped the implications, especially Pakura. Her situation bore a striking resemblance to that of the third Mizukage. Both stood as representatives of the commoner ninjas. The critical difference was that she had failed in the power struggle for the Kazekage seat, whereas the third Mizukage won. This success, however, came at a cost. As a champion of the commoner ninjas, the third Mizukage had a strained relationship with the rebellious bloodline limit clans in his village. Pakura, renowned for her remarkable achievements in battles against Kirigakure and the many lives she had claimed there, had gained substantial prestige. Her experience and knowledge of the village were unparalleled. Understanding Rasa's intent, Pakura nonetheless voiced her concerns. Those bloodline limit clans in Kirigakure are fiercely loyal to the Mizukage. It might not be easy to sway them into aligning with Sunagakure. Rasa nodded, his tone calm yet resolute. I understand. That's why my plan is straightforward, no adult men, only children and women. The others quickly caught onto his approach. Chiyo, contemplating the strategy, was the first to respond. That could work. Children can be raised with a deep sense of loyalty to Sunagakure, while women can pass on their bloodline limit abilities to strengthen our lineage. Though Pakura acknowledged the strategy's practicality, she couldn't suppress a sense of unease. As a woman, she found the implication of reducing women to reproductive tools unsettling. Rasa, however, seemed unfazed by the ethical nuances and pressed on. Exactly. To ensure these women and children integrate seamlessly into Sunagakure, we'll act only after the third Mizukage makes his move. As the saying goes, it's better to provide timely assistance than to decorate with unnecessary embellishments. Everyone nodded in agreement, appreciating the pragmatism of his plan. Rasa elaborated further. The situation in Kiridakure isn't urgent yet. I've assigned the Umbu to monitor developments. The reason I'm sharing this plan with you is twofold. First, because I trust those present to maintain confidentiality. Second, to inspire you. Our focus shouldn't be solely on the Mizukage. The ninja world is vast, and countless opportunities exist to identify and secure talented individuals, both inside and outside the village. As Rasa's words settled over them, the group couldn't help but think of the Uchiha clan in Konoha. They exchanged knowing glances, silently acknowledging the parallels. That concludes what I wanted to share today, Rasa said, signaling the end of the discussion. Take a few days to rest. Although the current conflicts don't directly concern us, I'm certain this fragile peace won't last long. The group nodded, understanding the underlying warning. It was evident that once Konoha recovered from their recent shock, retaliation for Sunagakure's raid was inevitable. As they left the meeting, each member found themselves lost in thought, contemplating the weight of Rasa's words and the path that lay ahead. Before long, only Rasa and Baki remained in the Kazekage's office. Well then, Kazekage-sama, I'll take my leave now, Baki announced, preparing to depart. There were still numerous tasks Rasa had assigned to the Umbu that required his attention. However, just as he turned to go, Rasa's voice halted him. I have one more task for you, Baki. This one is more important than anything we discussed today. The weight in Rasa's tone made Baki straighten immediately. Understood, Kazekage-sama. Please give your orders. Rasa's expression turned cold, his voice low and authoritative. Select 12 elite shinobis, trusted and capable. I have a mission for them. Baki hesitated for a brief moment, surprised by the sudden command, but quickly bowed in acknowledgement. Understood, Kazekage-sama. I'll see to it right away. Good. Go! With that, Baki left, and silence returned to the Kazekage's office. Alone once more, Rasa allowed himself to relax slightly, his calculating expression fading. The cold, businesslike demeanor he had worn all day eased just a little. No matter what, he had successfully overcome the first major obstacle in this world. He had secured the position of Kazekage. But there was no time to grow complacent. The challenges ahead would be relentless. This was the world of Naruto, after all. What troubled him even more was the presence of the Kama seal. It signified that his threats weren't limited to Madara Uchiha or Kagaya Otsutsuki. The Otsutsuki clan from Boruto lurked in the shadows, biding their time for the right moment to strike. A weary sigh escaped Rasa's lips as a dull ache formed in his temples. He rose from his chair and strode to the balcony. From this vantage point, he could see the village below, teeming with life. The recent victory had brought prosperity, and people bustled through the streets, celebrating and claiming their rewards. This village was his now. Being Kazekage meant wielding immense power. But that power came with an inescapable burden. A duty that left no room for hesitation. His gaze hardened. The next goal is to become strong enough to navigate this world freely, while making Sunagakure the strongest village in the ninja world. Just then, a knock echoed through the room. Rasa's expression instantly cooled, his professional mask returning in an instant. Come in. The door swung open, and the sight of the visitor caught Rasa slightly off guard. Kazekage-sama. The man greeted respectfully. You are Yashimaru? Yeah, the newcomer was none other than Yashimaru, his wife Karura's younger brother. In the original storyline, Yashimaru played a significant role in Gaara's life, only to die at his hands, following Rasa's orders. That memory stood out vividly in Rasa's mind. Despite his gentle demeanor, Yashimaru was a skilled ninja. At just 17, he had already reached the rank of Jonin. However, as a medical ninja, he had not participated in Rasa's recent missions. And now, he was here. Under Rasa's cold scrutiny, Yashimaru, whose delicate features carried an almost feminine gentleness, showed a flicker of nervousness. He hesitated briefly before lifting the elegantly crafted lunchbox in his hands and speaking. "Kazekage-sama, my sister was worried that you might be overworking yourself, so she personally made some chicken soup and asked me to bring it to you." Rasa was momentarily stunned but quickly grasped the situation. Man, it had been over half a month since he had transmigrated into this world, yet in all that time, he hadn't once seen his wife, Karura. Karura wasn't just an ordinary woman. As the wife of the Kazekage, she was a jonin of Sunagakure and a direct product of the second Kazekage's research into Shikaku's chakra. Like him, she possessed the ability to control sand. Rasa had no doubt that his careful disguises had been effective against most people. But Karura, someone who had lived beside him day in and day out, would be much harder to deceive. Fortunately, it no longer mattered. By now, he had firmly established himself in this world. Put it on the table." Yashimaru quickly complied, placing the lunchbox down with careful precision. He then lowered his head, preparing to take his leave. But just as he turned, a voice stopped him, one that caught him completely off guard. "Thank you for your hard work, Yashimaru." Yashimaru froze. His eyes widened in disbelief, as if questioning whether he had misheard. But before he could respond, Rasa continued. "When we're alone, don't call me Kazekage-sama. Just call me brother." Yashimaru's breath hitched, his surprise evident. Never before had he encountered such warmth from his brother-in-law. For a moment, he was speechless. And yet, Rasa wasn't finished. "Yashimaru, I plan to have Chiyo-sama take you as her apprentice. Your talent in medical ninjutsu is exceptional. It would be a waste for you not to have the right teacher guiding you. What do you think?" Chapter 35, Family. Becoming a jonin at 17 was an exceptional feat, no matter which village one hailed from. Of course, it couldn't compare to the rare prodigies who achieved the rank by the age of 12. However, considering Sunagakure's current predicament, where talent was in short supply, Yashimaru was undoubtedly the best candidate available. With Chiyo contemplating retirement, Rasa had to start identifying successors to lead both the puppet division and the sealing squad. Yashimaru was an ideal choice. He possessed both talent and unwavering loyalty. More importantly, he was family. Although Chiyo was renowned for her mastery of puppet techniques, the craft itself required extensive research on human anatomy. Additionally, she was an expert in poisons, an essential complement to puppetry. If Yashimaru could become her disciple, even if he failed to inherit the full breadth of her expertise, acquiring even half of her knowledge would be more than enough for Rasa's plans. But beyond all that, there was another, far more significant reason. Rasa needed someone he could trust to help manage the potential power he aimed to harness in the future. That power was the unique ability found in Yugo's cells. He wasn't entirely sure if his Kama seal could directly assimilate Yugo's ability to channel natural energy. But even if it could, those cells wouldn't be for his use alone. After all, he was the Kazekage of Sunagakure. The strength of the village always came first. He refused to end up like Naruto and Sasuke, who, despite their godlike abilities, still struggled endlessly, even in Boruto's era. Rasa wanted to enjoy the fruits of his labor, not be bound by them. Upon hearing his proposal, Yashimaru was momentarily stunned, but joy quickly overtook his surprise. He didn't hesitate for even a second before nodding enthusiastically. "Of course, Kazekage-sama, Nai-san. Learning from Elder Chiyo has always been my dream. I'll speak with Elder Chiyo soon. We should have an answer for you shortly." "Yes. Thank you." Yashimaru beamed with excitement, but when he noticed Rasa picking up the lunchbox on the table, he immediately understood the unspoken cue. He tactfully stepped back. "I'll take my leave now, Nai-san. Also, let Karura know I'll be home tonight. I've nearly wrapped up everything here." "Hi." With that, Yashimaru departed, leaving Rasa alone in the Kazekage's office once more. He slowly opened the lunchbox, his gaze falling upon the freshly made chicken soup, its warmth still radiating into the air. A sudden wave of nostalgia swept over him. He found himself recalling the very first night he had arrived in this world, the night he had looked into the gentle, worried eyes of Karura. The woman who was now his wife. So, she is my wife. That night, despite the good news earlier in the day, Sunagakure was still alive with activity. Taverns, inns, and barbecue shops were brimming with people, most of whom were ninjas returning from their missions. After all, when one earns money, it's only natural to spend it. The life of a ninja was perilous, with the constant shadow of death on the battlefield, so many had no habit of saving. They lived for the moment, indulging in the pleasures of life while they still could. Yet, this had little impact on Rasa. That evening, he arrived at a large building not far from the Kazekage's office. Due to the harsh climate, Sunagakure lacked the luxury of individual homes. Instead, the village was composed of towering stone buildings designed to withstand the relentless sandstorms. This was Rasa's home in this world. As soon as the door opened, the warmth inside was a sharp contrast to the chill of the desert night. The air was immediately filled with the tantalizing aromas of various dishes, stirring Rasa's senses. The moment Rasa stepped inside, his wife Karura, appearing like a delicate and innocent young woman, moved toward him with a gentle smile, greeting him softly. "Welcome home, Rasa-kun." She gave a slight bow, then immediately knelt to help him with his shoes and coat. Rasa, momentarily caught off guard, passively allowed her to take care of him in this way. Once he had changed, he entered the house and noticed the kitchen table was already laden with a variety of dishes. The stove continued to simmer something delicious, filling the air with an irresistible fragrance. "Please wait just a moment, Rasa-kun. The beef brisket will be ready soon." Rasa sat at the table, watching Karura move gracefully around the kitchen. An unexpected but comforting sense of home washed over him. Though the situation felt somewhat unfamiliar, he didn't feel uncomfortable. On the contrary, he felt an overwhelming peace here. The house wasn't large, but it exuded warmth and coziness. Even though he was the Kazekage, his home felt no different than an ordinary person's, considering the size of the rooms. After a brief moment of contemplation, Rasa stood up and walked over to the kitchen, positioning himself next to Karura. "Do you need help?" Karura looked up in surprise. Recalling what her brother had mentioned earlier about Rasa becoming more gentle, she cautiously responded. "The beef brisket is almost done. You only need to bring it to the table." "I've got it." Rasa accepted the towel Karura handed him, carefully placing the steaming beef brisket onto the table. Soon after, dinner began. As they ate, Rasa sincerely apologized. "I'm sorry, Karura. I haven't been home for the past 2 weeks." Karura's eyes brightened, and she quickly shook her head, speaking in a hurried tone. "No. Rasa-kun, you're the Kazekage now. The village depends on you. It's only natural that you're busy. Besides, I've heard about the recent events." Seeing his gentle and understanding wife, Rasa didn't feel the need to explain further. He simply shared with her what had happened over the past couple of weeks. Karura listened attentively, her large eyes wide with both admiration and concern. Her mouth continuously voiced her praise. "That's amazing." Her gaze was filled with a mixture of admiration and worry for her husband. Karura also expressed her gratitude for Rasa's decision to have her brother, Yashimaru, become Elder Chiyo's apprentice. In that small house, at that moment, they were no longer the Kazekage and his wife. They were simply a newly married couple enjoying a peaceful evening together. About an hour later, the hearty dinner was finished. Karura asked Rasa to sit on the sofa and relax while she cleaned up the kitchen. As Rasa sat in the living room, watching her bustle around in the kitchen, he let out a deep sigh of relief. Though the meal itself seemed uneventful, Rasa had fully embraced his role as a husband. He observed his wife in the kitchen, her presence radiating warmth and charm, and suddenly, an overwhelming surge of desire swept over him. Before transmigrating, Rasa had been a modern man, accustomed to the idea that a wife was someone a man dated, fell in love with, and then married. But in this world, dating was still a foreign concept. Initially, Rasa didn't know how to feel about it. However, after integrating into Rasa's body, he had fully accepted his role as Kazekage and, now, as a loving husband. Even though he hadn't dated or exchanged love confessions with her, it was a silent truth between them that he loved her. Once Karura finished tidying up the kitchen, she prepared to take a bath to wash off the lingering smell of cooking. "Rasa-kun, I'm going to wash up." At this moment, Rasa couldn't hold back any longer. He quickly crossed the room and leapt toward her. "Wait." Karura was startled, not understanding what her husband meant, until he swept her up into his arms in a princess carry. This tender display of affection, something Rasa had never shown since their marriage, left Karura stunned. Then, she heard the words that made her cheeks flush deeply. "Let's take a bath together." Karura's eyes widened before turning bright red. She felt the heat rise in her face as she looked at Rasa, her embarrassment evident. She then nodded, still blushing furiously. Rasa smirked, his eyes glinting with affection and amusement, and carried Karura to the bath. Although Rasa had asserted his authority as Kazekage to the people of Sunagakure, his wife, Karura, remained someone he cherished deeply. Tonight, he would show her just how much, and in doing so, he would deepen their bond, making their first child. Chapter 36, Sunagakure's Covert Operations Unit. Early morning, just before sunrise. The first rays of sunlight softly filtered through the window, bathing the room in a warm glow. The room, with its cozy, inviting decor, felt peaceful. On the large bed, a man and a woman lay intertwined, their naked bodies pressed together as they slept soundly. The scattered items in the room and the visible marks on the woman's neck revealed the passionate night the newlyweds had shared. Time seemed to stretch endlessly before the harsh light of dawn finally stirred them from their slumber. Karura stirred, feeling the weight of her husband's possessive gaze on her as he looked down at her from such a close distance. Her cheeks flushed as memories of his bold actions from the previous night flooded back. She attempted to sit up, intending to help her husband, the Kazekage, prepare for the day ahead. However, he gently but firmly pushed her back onto the bed, sealing her lips with a kiss. More than an hour passed in this intimate quiet before the room settled again. "Rest, just a little longer." Her husband's soothing words echoed softly as he pinned her down, urging her to remain in bed a while longer. Karura's face, still rosy from their shared moments, held a trace of confusion. He had changed, that much was clear. But instead of feeling troubled by the changes, she found herself savoring every moment of it. "I love him, so much," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as exhaustion slowly overtook her. Her face deepened in color as she buried her head into the covers, where the lingering scent of her husband surrounded her, comforting and familiar. Meanwhile, Rasa, oblivious to the private moments unfolding at home, was already preparing for the day ahead. After a night of unparalleled intimacy, he felt an unexpected lightness in his heart. The stress that had been building over the past weeks following his sudden arrival in the world of Naruto seemed to evaporate. A new energy seemed to course through him, and, to his surprise, he even felt his chakra surge slightly. He slipped back into his professional mindset as he made his way to the Kazekage office. As the Kazekage, the weight of responsibility was heavy on his shoulders, especially after the conclusion of a critical mission. The piles of documents needing his review and signature were substantial. Sadly, in Sunagakure, there were few people Rasa trusted enough to delegate this kind of responsibility to. He also needed to start making preparations for what was next. However, despite the daunting workload, he didn't find himself overwhelmed. His mood was far too good for that. Still, a better system of organization would be necessary if he were to avoid the fate of someone like Naruto, overburdened by the administrative demands of the village. Just then, Baki knocked on the door before entering. "Kazekage-sama, I've found the individuals you requested for the task yesterday." "Good. Bring them in." A short time later, Baki returned, leading 12 masked Umbu shinobi into the room. The squad knelt before Rasa with disciplined precision. "Remove your masks." Even Baki could sense that Rasa was in an unusually good mood today. The usual coldness in his voice was replaced with a warmth that was almost surprising. However, despite this shift in tone, the Umbu remained wary, quickly removing their masks. Rasa's gaze swept across them, his eyes sharp as he assessed each member's capabilities. At that moment, Baki handed Rasa dossiers of the 12 shinobi. Rasa scanned them quickly, nodding in approval. From their backgrounds, it was clear that these 12 shinobi were perfect candidates. They had been born and raised in Sunagakure, with parents who had also served as shinobi for the village, an ancestral connection that ensured their loyalty. Their family ties were minimal, their parents had died as war heroes, and they had no significant living relatives. Their lives were simple and uncomplicated as a result. Furthermore, none of them had any affiliation with factions, whether commoners or the aristocracy. Their sole allegiance was to the Kazekage. Excellent. Rasa placed the dossiers on his desk and addressed the group. From now on, you are no longer members of the Umbu. You are the first members of a new department I am establishing, Sunagakure's Covert Operations Unit. The 12 shinobi bowed their heads in acknowledgement. We obey, Kazekage-sama. Rasa's tone turned cold again as he continued. The purpose of this unit is straightforward. There are tasks the Umbu cannot handle or must remain completely secret. Do you understand? Even Baki, sensing the gravity of the situation, shifted uneasily and knelt slightly. I apologize for the Umbu's shortcomings, Kazekage-sama. Rasa shook his head in response. No. The Umbu has done well. This is simply an additional measure. Baki let out a quiet sigh of relief. The Covert Operations Unit will temporarily remain under the Umbu's jurisdiction, retaining its current code names. However, from this day forward, this unit will report directly to me and answer solely to my orders. Is that clear? Understood, Kazekage-sama. Rasa nodded in approval, then began issuing tasks. Now, among you, who is familiar with Kazekage? 3 shinobi stepped forward in unison. I've completed missions in Kazekage before, Kazekage-sama. I once accompanied the Third Kazekage to meet with Kazekage's representatives. I've conducted infiltration missions in Kazekage. Rasa nodded approvingly and handed them a prepared scroll. There is someone in Kazekage I need you to investigate. All the details are in this scroll. Begin immediately and report back with your findings as soon as possible. Understood, Kazekage-sama. The 3 shinobi departed swiftly, their mission clear and urgent. Rasa continued, his voice steady. Who here is familiar with the land of demons? 3 shinobi stepped forward, each indicating their experience with the region. Rasa handed them another scroll, and they, too, left promptly. That left 6 shinobi standing in the room. Who is familiar with Roran? 2 shinobi stepped forward, ready to offer their expertise. Good. You 2 will accompany me to Roran in 3 days. Rasa's gaze shifted to the remaining 4. As for the rest of you, I have another mission. He handed them a scroll detailing an operation involving Yugo. Once all 12 shinobi had departed on their assigned missions, only Baki and Rasa remained in the office. Baki, though outwardly calm, was still tense. To him, creating the Covert Operations Unit felt like an implicit criticism of the Umbu's capabilities. Rasa, aware of this unease, decided to address it through action rather than words. Come here, Baki. Extend your hand. Baki, though confused, approached with his head slightly bowed and extended his hand without question. The moment Rasa's chakra flowed into him, Baki experienced the same overwhelming surge of power that Yashimaru and Pakura had once felt when they first encountered the star-release chakra mode. His strength doubled in an instant, a sensation that left him momentarily breathless. This is my reward to you, Baki. I never overlook the loyalty of my subordinates. Baki trembled with emotion, his eyes shining with gratitude. Serving you, Kazekage-sama, is my greatest honor. Rasa gave a brief nod of approval. Good. Here's a scroll that explains the chakra I've shared with you. Study it carefully. Sunagakure will face many challenges in the coming days. Chapter 37, Heading to Roran. Rasa wasn't deliberately seeking to frighten himself. The peace that currently lingered in Sunagakure was nothing more than a temporary reprieve, an illusion, fleeting at best. Once the spies from the other ninja villages uncovered Rasa's actions and his motives within Sunagakure, the news would spread quickly across the entire ninja world. The other four great nations would not sit idle. Most notably, Konoha, already seething with animosity towards Sunagakure, would take swift action. At this moment, Konoha indeed harbored deep-seated resentment towards Sunagakure. However, the source of this hatred was not internal matters, but rather external forces and circumstances. Sunagakure's recent campaign to seize vast resources had directly targeted the elite aristocracy of 17 cities. These nobles were closely tied to the daimyo of the Land of Fire, with many being his relatives or even siblings. The plundering of nearly 90% of their wealth dealt a blow that was far worse than death itself. Once Sunagakure retreated and its objectives were made clear, Konoha received numerous orders from the daimyo of the Land of Fire, demanding that no expense be spared in retrieving the stolen treasures. Konoha was more than willing to comply. Upon discovering the true scale of Sunagakure's intentions, Konoha realized that it had fallen right into the trap set by the village from the very beginning. Not only had Sunagakure sown division within Konoha through its covert schemes, but it had also triggered attacks from both Kumogakure and Iwagakure. Despite this, Konoha had little choice but to endure the situation, for now. The immediate threat posed by Kumogakure and Iwagakure far outweighed the potential danger of Sunagakure in the short term. Over the past 2 weeks, Konoha had suffered setbacks on the battlefield. The pressure of fighting on two fronts had taken its toll on the village. Konoha's struggle with Kumogakure was particularly harsh. When Kumogakure learned that Orochimaru, a sworn enemy of their village, was leading the front lines for Konoha, they responded with all their might. Even the Third Raikage himself had stepped onto the battlefield with a singular goal, to defeat Konoha and kill Orochimaru. In response, the Third Hokage was forced to leave Konoha and head to the front lines to stabilize the situation. His intervention temporarily eased the pressure on the village. As for Konoha's conflict with Iwagakure, the situation was equally dire. Though Iwagakure's offensive was somewhat restrained, avoiding the deployment of their most elite forces, the arrival of two Jinchuriki, along with their tailed beasts, placed Konoha's forces in an untenable position. Without Minato's Flying Thunder God technique, the tailed beast bombs would have likely decimated Konoha's forces. Despite Jiraiya's considerable strength, he struggled to counter these devastating weapons of war without relying on Sage Mode. It was also important to note that Iwagakure's two Jinchuriki were fully capable of transforming into their tailed beasts. With great arrogance, they declared that if Konoha wished to defeat them, they would have to send their Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. No one else, in their eyes, was worthy of their time. Adding to Konoha's mounting troubles, Kirigakure's ninjas had been showing up increasingly as mercenaries, ambushing supply convoys in the rear. Their presence stretched Konoha thin, forcing the village to defend itself on multiple fronts, a task that was becoming more and more difficult by the day. Konoha was no longer the mighty force it once was during the Second Great Ninja War. The internal strife that had plagued the village, including the suicide of Tsukumo Hatake and Tsunade's departure, had thrown the village into a precarious period of transition. What Konoha desperately needed now was a breakthrough, a way to regain its strength and resolve. And it wasn't just Konoha that was in dire need of change. The Third Tsuchikage, Inoki, of Iwagakure, shared similar frustrations. Land of Earth, Iwagakure. Inside the Tsuchikage's office, the diminutive Inoki sat, reviewing intelligence gathered by his village's spies about Sunagakure. A sneer crossed his face as he muttered under his breath. How naive. That Fourth Kazekage brat from Sunagakure thinks he can stay neutral, watch us tear each other apart, and then swoop in to reap the benefits? With that, he summoned the Umbu, handing them a sealed scroll, which he instructed them to deliver to the Third Raikage of Kumogakure on his behalf. The following day, the Third Raikage received the letter on the front lines. When the Kumogakure ninjas learned that the Third Shinobi had sent them a message, they were taken aback. Despite both villages waging war against Konoha as a common enemy, there had been no direct contact between the Kage-level leaders since the war began. Curious, the Third Shinobi opened the scroll, only to scoff in disdain upon reading it. This reaction piqued the interest of his son, the future Fourth Shinobi, and Darui. "Father, what does that old man Inoki want?" The Third Shinobi handed the scroll to Darui with a scoff. "What else?" "That calculating Inoki wants us to put pressure on Sunagakure, forcing them to join us in attacking Konoha." "Why?" I asked, still struggling to grasp the situation fully. Seeing the lack of understanding, Darui stepped in to explain. "The Third Shinobi doesn't want Sunagakure to profit from this conflict. According to our intelligence, Sunagakure secured a considerable sum of resources after successfully raiding the Land of Fire. The Fourth Kazekage is now using those funds to bolster his village. Inoki doesn't want Sunagakure to become any stronger." The future Fourth Shinobi quickly grasped the situation. "So, father, should we go ahead with it?" "Of course." "Why wouldn't we?" the Third Shinobi replied. "This works perfectly with our plans to attack Konoha, and there's no downside." "But what if the Fourth Kazekage refuses?" I asked, concern creeping into his voice. The Third Shinobi chuckled in return. "Don't worry about that. That brat is clever enough to see the benefits. And if he doesn't? Well, I'll use my fists to show him the right choice." With that, the Third Shinobi's attention shifted to Darui. "Speaking of which, we could learn a thing or two from that brat's strategy. The Land of Fire is an incredibly rich land, bountiful to the point of excess." Darui immediately understood and nodded. "Understood, Rikage-sama. I'll take care of it." Meanwhile, Rasa remained completely unaware that the tranquility he was enjoying was about to be shattered. Soon, Kumogakure and Iwagakure would join forces to pressure Sunagakure into attacking Konoha. However, even if Rasa had known about the impending threat, he wouldn't have been concerned. His focus lay elsewhere. He was already on his way to Roran. Dragon Vein Chakra. That was his goal this time. From his earlier experiments, Rasa had gained some insight into his Kama seal. In simple terms, it allowed him to absorb chakra and convert its distinct properties into his own, such as Shikaku's sand controlling ability and curse marks, or the enhanced vitality derived from the star chakra. This understanding heightened his anticipation of the power the Dragon Vein Chakra could provide. After all, the Dragon Vein Chakra was rumored to possess space-time abilities, having once transported Naruto Uzumaki back in time in the original timeline. Space-time abilities were among the highest-tier powers in any world system, and the ninja world was no exception, whether it was Minato's Flying Thunder God technique or Obito's Kamui. If Rasa could absorb the Dragon Vein Chakra and gain space-time abilities, his prospects for survival in the ninja world would improve exponentially. At the very least, if he couldn't win a battle, he would still have the means to escape. Chapter 38, Roaring Kingdom. Guided by two Umbu ninjas, Rasa traversed the vast desert for an entire day and night. The endless dunes stretched out before him, and after a long journey, he finally arrived at the astonishing city hidden in the desert's oasis. The city stood in stark contrast to the barren surroundings. Towering buildings reached into the sky, scattered throughout the vast expanse of the city. In the center, lush greenery spread across the area, completely masking any trace of the desert. It was as if the city was a perfect, dreamlike oasis, something out of place in such an arid land. It was a sight that defied expectations, a bustling metropolis unlike anything one would imagine in the heart of the desert. The city was home to countless residents of the Roaring Kingdom, who lived amidst the incredible transformation of the once desolate area. Both Umbu ninjas gasped in shock as they took in the sight before them. Their surprise was palpable. Rasa, puzzled by their reaction, turned to them. "What's wrong? Haven't you been to Roran before?" The two Umbu ninjas, codenamed Cat and Viper, wore masks decorated with cat and snake patterns, respectively. Cat was the first to speak, still visibly stunned. "Kazekage-sama, I came to Roran 3 years ago, but back then, the city wasn't nearly as prosperous. The change is unbelievable. No, it's more like the entire city has transformed into something completely different. Viper, equally astonished, nodded in agreement. Yes, Kazekage-sama. I was here 4 years ago, and at that time, there were no tall buildings, and the city was far less impressive. It's hard to believe that such a massive transformation could occur in just 3 years. As the two continued to discuss their shock, Rasa suddenly sensed something amiss. Between the towering buildings, a network of pipes connected them, and within these pipes, invisible chakra threads flowed. The chakra appeared to be directly linking the residents of Roran, almost as if some unseen puppeteer was controlling them. Puppets? Rasa murmured, a realization dawning on him. In that instant, he understood what was happening. Could it be that the rogue ninja from the future world had arrived in this time? If he recalled correctly, the rogue ninja from the future was named Mukade, and he was also a master puppeteer. Noticing Rasa's strange expression, the two Umbu ninjas exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued. At first, the two Umbu ninjas hadn't noticed anything unusual, but as elite jonin, their keen senses quickly caught on after observing the scene more closely. Their faces drained of color, and their shock was evident. Is this the village's puppetry technique? How is this possible? Cat whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. Such a large number of puppets, are you serious? Viper added, his voice trembling. Puppetry was a closely guarded secret technique of Sunagakure, and it should have no place in Roran. The sheer number of chakra threads was staggering, indicating that the puppeteer had somehow turned the entire country into puppets, with a number likely in the tens of thousands. It was a horrifying realization that this was no ordinary puppet show. In that instant, it became painfully clear to the Umbu ninjas why the Kazekage had come to this country. Had Sunagakure's puppetry techniques been leaked? Had someone from their own ranks betrayed them? Rasa, however, wasn't fazed by the shock that had gripped his subordinates. He calmly issued his orders. Go investigate everything about these puppets, but stay out of sight, he instructed firmly. Understood, Kazekage-sama. The two Umbu ninjas vanished into the shadows without hesitation. As the Umbu went off to gather information, Rasa remained still, his mind working over the situation. His gaze wandered across the vast landscape of Roran, analyzing the puzzling scene before him. A breeze stirred the sand at his feet, and as it flowed outward, countless grains spread across the desert, gradually filling the entire Roran kingdom. At the same time, Rasa sent out strands of his chakra-infused sand. It seeped into the pipes connecting the buildings, its particles attaching to the chakra threads that pulsed through the city. This technique, known as sand sense, was one of Rasa's personal creations. It stemmed from his mastery over sand manipulation, which had been perfected through years of constant communication and collaboration with his wife, Karura. Like him, she also possessed the ability to control sand, and their combined knowledge had allowed Rasa to create advanced sand techniques, many of which were derived from the legacy of the second Kazekage, who had pioneered sand-based combat. With a focus, Rasa activated his sand sense, tapping into the sand particles he had scattered throughout the city. His heightened sensory ability allowed him to perceive everything within the entire Roran kingdom, including the presence of the elusive dragon vein chakra. Found it! Rasa smirked. Although he had brought the Umbu with him on this mission, there were some tasks Rasa preferred to handle on his own. This was one of those moments. In the blink of an eye, Rasa's body dissolved into sand, his form scattering and reforming as he vanished from sight. This was yet another technique born of his mastery over sand manipulation, the sand body technique, which allowed him to transform into pure sand and travel swiftly without leaving a trace. At his current level of power, Rasa wasn't invincible, but he was certainly one of the top-tier figures in the ninja world. When there was something he desired, he didn't need to consult with its owner, he would simply take it. His power was undeniable, much like the meteorite of Hoshigakure, whose brilliance shone across the world. In just a few minutes, Rasa, using the feedback from his sand-based sensory ability, pinpointed the location of the sealed dragon vein chakra in Roran. The source was found at the tallest tower in the kingdom, a majestic structure that soared dozens of stories into the air. Its European architectural style was striking, featuring brilliant glass windows etched with an image of the Virgin Mary. This tower also served as the royal palace of Roran. At its peak, a mysterious hexagonal structure stood, surrounded by a network of pipes. The immense chakra radiated from this hexagon and was distributed throughout the entire country via the pipes that snaked across the land. Beneath the tower, hundreds of meters underground, a massive puppet manufacturing facility existed, enveloped by thick pipes. In this underground chamber, puppet-like creatures, resembling large insects, were produced, their bodies charged with purple chakra from a colossal machine. Once activated through chakra threads, these creatures moved autonomously, ready to carry out their master's will. From his concealed position, high above the pipes, Rasa focused his attention on the heart of the facility, the central machine, the pipes, and most importantly, the sealing mechanism that contained the overwhelming chakra. His keen sensory ability pinpointed the immense chakra radiating from this location. The immediate issue, however, was how to avoid detection by these puppets. While Rasa didn't consider the puppets, or even the rogue ninja Mukade from the future, to be a significant threat, he found it irritating to be disturbed during his absorption of the chakra. It seemed he would have to deal with Mukade first. Rasa resolved to leave the task to Cat and Viper, his two Umbu companions. With their strength, they could buy him enough time. There was no rush. The dragon vein chakra was right where he wanted it, and it wasn't going anywhere. Just as he prepared to move forward with his plan, however, his sand-sensing ability detected something unusual. Someone was coming up the spiral staircase above him. Rasa quickly concealed his presence, blending into the environment as he waited to see who would emerge. A beautiful, mature woman appeared at the top of the staircase. She was dressed in a deep crimson gown, the kind worn only by the Queen of Roran, and topped with a white hat. She hurried toward the center of the chamber. The puppets showed no reaction to her presence, which only seemed to deepen Rasa's curiosity. The woman was nervous. Her movements agitated as she made her way toward the central sealing mechanism of the dragon vein chakra. She formed a series of intricate hand seals before pressing her palms against the sealing stone. Dragon vein seal, destruction. As the words left her lips, a wave of energy, similar to the chakra of the dragon vein, surged into the seal. The chakra from the dragon vein visibly dissipated from the surrounding machines and pipes, and the puppet production facility ground to a halt as if it had suddenly lost its power source. The woman exhaled a sigh of relief, clearly glad to have halted the flow of chakra, though her sense of calm was short-lived. Just as she relaxed, a voice came from behind her, sending a chill down her spine. "Your Majesty, could you kindly explain why you are here?" Chapter 39, Queen of Roran. In the dimly lit underground factory, the air was heavy with tension. The Queen of Roran trembled, her entire body stiffening at the unexpected intrusion. But despite the fear creeping into her veins, she quickly regained her composure. Her face hardened, determination flickering in her eyes. She slowly rose to her feet, her gaze firm as she turned to face the direction of the spiral staircase exit. At the entrance stood a thin man with a contemptuous smile, a smile so insidious that anyone who saw it would immediately feel revulsion. With him were two puppets, their mechanical limbs twitching in a hauntingly lifelike manner. In that moment, it seemed as though he, not the queen, was the true ruler of this land. The Queen of Roran appeared as nothing more than a prisoner in her own domain. The queen placed her right hand on her chest, steadying herself as she gathered the strength to speak. Her voice was resolute, loud enough to cut through the tense atmosphere. "Amrokuzan, I am the queen of this country. Do I really need to explain myself to you, S?" Amrokuzan's cold, cruel laugh echoed through the chamber, chilling the queen's resolve. He. "Your Majesty, you don't owe me any explanations about where you're going, but why did you reseal the dragon vein? That, I believe, is something you need to explain to me. After all, everything that Roran is today, the prosperity, the advancements, it all stems from my technology and the power of Roran's dragon vein. Without its chakra, Roran will come to a halt. You can't be so reckless." The queen's brow furrowed deeply, her expression shifting to one of icy contempt. She took a step forward, her voice unwavering as she spoke. "Stop lying to me, Anro-kuzen. I see through your intentions now." She pointed at the puppets surrounding them, each one unnervingly still, their lifeless eyes watching her every move. "You aren't using the Dragon Vein's power for the good of Roran. No. You've been using it to create weapons of war. These puppets, they are the weapons you've made." Anro-kuzen's expression shifted, a slight flash of surprise crossing his face. But it quickly morphed back into his usual sinister smile. "Ha! So, you figured it out. You're not as easily fooled as I thought. I knew this day would come, though I didn't expect it to be so soon." The queen's heart sank, her stomach twisting with unease as she saw him so easily admit to his treachery. Her eyes tensed in suspicion. "Why? Don't you even want to maintain the pretense anymore?" Anro-kuzen's eyes gleamed, the smile never leaving his face. "No, there's no need for pretense anymore." With that, Mukade took a few steps forward, his eyes gleaming with a dark satisfaction as he watched the Queen of Roran's stunned reaction. She instinctively took a step back, fear creeping into her expression, but then, as if gathering her resolve, she clenched her jaw and raised her head high. "Anro-kuzen, are you planning to kill me here? Without me, you won't be able to open the seal again." Mukade sneered disdainfully, as if the queen's words were nothing more than an irritation to him. "Your Majesty, sometimes you're surprisingly clever, but other times, you're shockingly naive. Why do you think only you can open the seal here?" The queen's eyes widened, and she staggered slightly, a sense of dread flooding over her. She quickly recovered, her mind racing as she thought through the situation, and then, with more confidence, she retorted. "It's useless. That child Sarah may have the same power as I do, but she doesn't even know how to break the seal." Mukade's smile deepened as he watched her. He found her self-righteous confidence almost amusing. He stepped closer, savoring the tension in the air. "Is that so? Well, let me tell you a secret, Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying a sinister undertone. The queen's heart skipped a beat as she looked at him with suspicion and rising dread. "My name is actually not Anro-kuzen. I'm Mukade and I'm not from this era, but from the future, 18 years ahead." 18 years into the future? The queen's voice cracked in disbelief, and she took a step back, almost unable to process his words. "That's right. In my time, Roran was already destroyed due to war. But I was fortunate enough to discover the Dragon Vein in the ruins. I found a way to break its seal. Unfortunately, when I was about to do so, I discovered another layer of sealing, one placed by the Fourth Hokage of Konoha using his flying thunder god kunai. This was something I couldn't open. But I didn't give up. I studied the seal, and found a way to unlock it, through the space-time jutsu embedded in the Fourth Hokage's kunai. By using the Dragon Vein's chakra, I sent myself back to the past, before the Dragon Vein was sealed. Now, I can completely take the power of the Dragon Vein for myself." The Queen of Roran stood frozen, processing the magnitude of Mukade's revelation. His words revealed new information, but the key point was clear: Mukade knew the secret to unlock the Dragon Vein's power. Meanwhile, on the other side, hidden in the shadows, Rasa had been eavesdropping on the conversation. His mind was racing as he pieced together the puzzle. So, Mukade didn't come to the past using the Dragon Vein's power after all, Rasa thought. He used the curse mark on the Flying Thunder God kunai to travel back in time. If that's the case, then the Dragon Vein chakra itself doesn't hold as much value for him as I thought. Mukade seemed to enjoy watching the Queen of Roran's disorientation, continuing his sinister laugh. "I could have dealt with you a long time ago. After all, you're smarter, but that little girl is easier to control. However, I've discovered some interesting things that made me have to keep you around a little longer." The queen, though terrified, felt a flicker of hope, perhaps she could still survive this. But Mukade's next words quickly extinguished that faint glimmer of hope. "What a pity. I didn't plan on explaining anything. Your Majesty, you can go to another world with your doubts. I'll take good care of that child. He. As he finished speaking, the two puppets that had been standing quietly behind him suddenly sprang to life. Their long, razor-sharp blades extended from their arms, glinting menacingly in the dim light. With frightening speed, they flew toward the Queen of Roran. It's a pity you won't see the moment when I use the Dragon Vein's power to rule this land. At that moment, the Queen of Roran's eyes widened as the tips of the twin blades, gleaming coldly, seemed to inch closer to her. It felt as though the blades were about to pierce her, ending her life in an instant. But suddenly, as if time itself had come to a halt, the puppets that had been rushing toward her froze midair, completely motionless. Mukade, caught completely off guard, stood frozen in disbelief. The Queen of Roran, who had resigned herself to death just moments ago, stood dumbfounded, unable to understand what was happening. "What's going on?" she muttered, her voice tinged with confusion and fear. Mukade, too, was lost. He tried to control the puppets with his chakra threads, but to his shock, they did not respond at all. He poured more chakra into them, his face contorting with frustration, but there was no effect. Wait, something was happening. The puppets, once so agile and powerful, now seemed to rust in midair. Their joints struggled, creaking and groaning under the strain. Creak, creak. The sound filled the air, adding an eerie atmosphere to the otherwise still room. At that moment, fine grains of sand began to seep out from the seams of the puppets. It was a strange, almost magical sight, as the sand flowed out in slow, deliberate streams, completely capturing the attention of both Mukade and the Queen of Roran. The Queen still didn't understand what was happening, her mind racing to catch up with the situation, but Mukade's eyes widened in shock and fury. How is this possible? Could it be Gaara? His voice was low, trembling with disbelief. He immediately started scanning his surroundings, his sharp eyes darting around, searching for the figure he feared. Damn it! Gaara, you monster, come out! Mukade snarled, his temper flaring. Then, as if the very air had turned thick with dread, Mukade's eyes widened in fear, and his body trembled. A presence he had never wanted to face materialized before him. No, impossible. Kazekage-sama. Rasa, the Kazekage of Sunagakure, stood before him. Chapter 40, Mukade. Kazekage-sama? You seem to recognize me, and I can tell you're skilled in puppetry techniques. Are you a ninja from Sunagakure? But why don't I remember you? In the dim world, Rasa's voice echoed slowly, reverberating through the dark underground chamber. The Queen of Roran turned her gaze toward the voice, her surprise evident. From the shadows, a figure emerged, his presence strong and imposing. The man had short dusty red hair, exuding the aura of a fierce beast. The Queen of Roran stared at him in disbelief. She had never imagined there would be another man hiding here, especially one whom Mukade referred to as the Kazekage of Sunagakure. As the Queen of Roran, she was always well informed about the outside world, so the presence of such a high-ranking figure in Roran made no sense. If the Queen of Roran was simply shocked, Mukade's reaction was far more intense. His eyes widened in terror as he stared at Rasa, stepping out of the shadows. His body instinctively began to retreat, taking 2 or 3 steps back. Only after a moment did he realize what was happening. It was like he was trying to compose himself, but his expression twisted into a snarl, his voice full of fury as he shouted. What's going on? Why are you here, Fourth Kazekage? Didn't you die? I died? And the Fourth Kazekage, what are you talking about? Rasa couldn't help but feel proud of his performance. His acting was truly top-notch. Mukade was clearly caught off guard. His realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His face darkened, his fists clenched, and he gritted his teeth as he muttered under his breath. Could it be that I was right? I didn't return to the past, I've ended up in another parallel world? Rasa was taken aback by Mukade's words, a strange sense of disbelief flooding him. A parallel world? But this wasn't the time to dwell on such thoughts. Keeping up his act, Rasa furrowed his brow and pressed on. Your name is Mukade, right? How do you know Sunagakure's puppetry techniques? You'd better explain yourself, or else. By now, Mukade had figured it out. No wonder some of the intel he gathered recently pointed to discrepancies in the Third Great Ninja War compared to what he'd recorded before. The Fourth Kazekage in front of him must be the Fourth Kazekage of this world Sunagakure. Marvelous, truly marvelous. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Mukade suddenly became exhilarated. His eyes glowed red with excitement, bloodshot and wild as he fixed his gaze on Rasa. As his chakra surged, the puppets scattered throughout the Roaring Kingdom began to move toward their location. Mukade sneered, his laughter dark and twisted. Although the Fourth Kazekage from my world is already dead, preventing me from getting my revenge, killing you here will be just as satisfying. A buzzing sound filled the air, like the swarm of locusts descending on a field. From the high towers above, puppets began to swoop down in dense swarms, visible to the naked eye. But Rasa, seemingly oblivious to the overwhelming number of puppets descending, remained unfazed. He calmly asked, "It seems like you really hate me." Mukade, now completely consumed by rage, let out a roar, his fury palpable. "Of course I hate you. As the Fourth Kazekage, you suppressed me, a genius puppeteer from Sunagakure, just to hand over the village's puppet army to your own son, Kankuro. And to make it worse, the Kazekage position, which should have been mine, was taken by your freak of a son, Gaara. Damn, damn!" Mukade's arms flailed violently, as if trying to release all his pent-up rage. "I'm not just going to kill you, I'll destroy Sunagakure in this world with the puppet army I created." His madness startled the Queen of Roran, but she didn't have time to react before Mukade's eyes widened in shock. Because, instead of fear, Rasa's gaze met him with something else, pity. It was the look one might give a mere insect. "Kill me? Destroy Sunagakure? You talk a big game. But you're nothing but a tiny bug." "Bug!" Mukade froze, his eyes widening in disbelief, unable to process Rasa's words. His body trembled with rage, veins bulging on his forehead. "How dare you call me a bug? I'll kill you, I swear I will." Mukade's hatred intensified, more than he'd ever felt for the Fourth Kazekage in his own world. The Kazekage before him was a mockery of the position he thought he should have had. "Since that's the case, let me show you my most powerful puppetry technique." Boom! In the blink of an eye, Mukade's body began to expand rapidly, his form distorting. Within moments, he had transformed into a massive insect with 6 legs, a human-like face, and thick armor covering his body. He hissed at Rasa, his voice dripping with malice. "Are you afraid? Are you terrified? Surrender to my power." Yet, despite the monstrous transformation before him, Rasa remained unaffected. His cold, unwavering gaze locked onto Mukade. No matter how big the bug, it's still just a bug. Mukade, now a giant insect, froze for a moment, disbelief flashing in his eyes. Then, his fury boiled over even further. "Damn it!" Mukade roared, his 6 legs thrashing wildly as he charged at Rasa with all his might. But it was too late. Boom! Before Mukade could even close the distance, 6 massive sand spears descended from the sky with explosive force, pinning Mukade's giant form to the ground. Magnet release, 6-round sand prison. Mukade struggled, his massive body twitching in vain as he tried to free himself. His 6 legs flailed like a bug stuck to a board, but the sand spears held him fast. "Curse you!" he shouted, his anger reaching a new level. Rasa frowned, his voice tinged with annoyance. "Is that all? You think this level of power can dominate the ninja world?" At Rasa's words, Mukade, fully transformed into a monstrous insect, felt his chakra surge wildly. Before anyone's eyes, the 6 sand spears pinning him down began to disintegrate. Is this chakra absorption? That was right. Rasa could feel his chakra being absorbed by the sand spears, losing his grip on them. The puppet Mukade had created seemed to possess the ability to drain chakra. This revelation intrigued Rasa as Mukade's puppetry techniques were more complex than he had imagined. As the Kazekage, Rasa had a vested interest in discovering any secret techniques that could potentially strengthen Sunigakure. What he saw next solidified his decision to capture Mukade alive. Before his eyes, the puppet body impaled by Rasa's 6 sand spears began to regenerate at an alarming rate, healing itself as if nothing had happened. Not only that, but it also has rapid regeneration? Interesting. Unforgivable, unforgivable. Mukade's voice shook with uncontrollable rage. The sight of Rasa looking at him with interest only served to fuel his fury even more. His 2 claws morphed into spinning blades, and with a furious howl, he charged forward. Oh! Rasa's eyes lit up once more, impressed by Mukade's movements. But unfortunately for Mukade, his advance was short-lived. Before he could take more than a few steps. Stone of sand. A massive stone, dense with high-density sand particles and shaped like a square, came crashing down from the sky. It fell with the weight and force of a small mountain. Boom! The sheer force of the stone was enough to crush Mukade's enormous insect-like body in an instant, scattering puppet parts across the ground. While Mukade's puppet had the ability to absorb chakra, it couldn't withstand the overwhelming force of nature itself. The Queen of Roran, watching as Mukade's body was reduced to pieces, turned to Rasa with wide eyes. She stared at him in stunned amazement. Is Anrokuzen, no, Mukade, dead? She asked, disbelief coloring her voice. No. Rasa shook his head as he watched the swarming puppets still descending from the sky. He looked up thoughtfully. He's probably still alive. Fascinating. This ability is somewhat similar to the sage art of the Ryuchi cave, the reincarnation of the non-living. Huh! Before the queen could fully process Rasa's words, she was suddenly enveloped in a golden sand aura that lifted her into the air. Rasa was similarly lifted, and as they ascended, countless puppets continued to rain down from above. Mukade's shattered body, once obliterated by the giant stone, began to merge with the incoming puppets. His form grew larger and larger as the fusion continued, taking shape once again. It seems this place is no longer suitable as a battlefield. Let's head outside. Chapter 41, Inorganic Reincarnation. Inorganic reincarnation, a technique originating from one of the 3 legendary sanctuaries in the Naruto universe, Ryuchi Cave. This natural energy has the power to breathe life into inanimate objects, allowing the user to control them. When compared to using simple chakra to control objects, this energy offers major benefits. It provides greater ease and flexibility while consuming far less energy because the controlled objects are no longer mere lifeless things. They transform into living entities capable of acting according to the user's will. No wonder Mukade is able to control so many puppets. At this moment, as Mukade absorbed the puppets from the entire Roran region, integrating them into his body, Rasa could feel a familiar surge of power. The combination of inorganic reincarnation with puppet technique seemed like a match made in heaven. But that wasn't all. Rasa also noticed something even more fascinating: object transformation. To put it simply, this ability allowed the controlled objects to be completely transformed into different ones. Just a moment ago, Rasa had seen Mukade change his wooden claws into long, sharp iron blades. This transformation ability was also evident during the fusion process. The puppets descending from above merged seamlessly with Mukade's shattered body. Yes, they merged, more than just joined. Thanks to the Dragon Vein chakra, these puppets fused like water, blending into water and forming a completely new body. At that very moment, Rasa felt like he was starting to understand the true nature of the Dragon Vein chakra. Inorganic reincarnation, object transformation, and this incredible regenerative power, it all seemed strikingly similar to the natural energy found in Ryuchi Cave. What an unexpected turn of events! Even though the time-space powers were lost, gaining access to this form of natural energy was more than worth the trade-off. Whoosh! Under Rasa's control, the gold dust carried him and the bewildered Queen of Roran, shattering the glass surrounding the statue of the Holy Mother as they broke free into the open air, landing softly on the grassy ground below the high tower. Seeing her chance to escape, the Queen of Roran immediately attempted to flee in order to reveal Anne Rokuzen's true identity to her people. But a wall of gold dust rose in her path, blocking her escape. Turning around, she saw Rasa standing with cold eyes. "Sorry, you can't leave just yet. I still need you to undo the seal on the dragon vein. In return, I'll take care of this traitor from Sunagakure, who has come from the future." The Queen of Roran's eyes widened as the truth dawned on her. "So that's it. Kazekage of Sunagakure, you didn't come to save me, you came for the dragon vein's power, didn't you?" Rasa turned to face her, his expression calm, yet there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. "What else? Did you think I was here to rescue you because I found you beautiful and wanted to be your hero?" The Queen of Roran was stunned for a brief moment before her face quickly transformed into anger. Still, the Queen of Roran couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why were there no guards in sight beneath the high tower where the Roran royal palace stood? She scanned her surroundings, desperately searching for someone who might help her rescue her daughter, Sarah. But no matter where she looked, not a single soul was visible. What's going on here? Sweat began to shower on her forehead when Rasa answered her query. It's simple. As queen, you've long been rendered powerless by your minister. Remember the guards and citizens you've been seeing? They were nothing more than puppets he created for you. The queen's eyes widened in disbelief as she took in his words. That's impossible. The people of Roran, they're real. They're living, breathing beings. There's no way they're puppets. It must be Mukade. She stammered, trying to hold onto her understanding of the world around her, but Rasa didn't want to show her any delusions. That, I wouldn't know. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble beneath them. A roar, filled with rage and fury, echoed throughout the entire kingdom of Roran. I'll kill you. Kill you, you bastard Fourth Kazekage. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the earth split into multiple sections, cracking open like a massive wound. From these newly formed fissures, something monstrous began to rise, a terrifying fusion of scorpion and centipede, towering dozens of meters high. It loomed before them, its size rivaling that of a tailed beast, its furious roar shaking the very foundation of the kingdom. Behold my ultimate puppet technique, Fourth Kazekage. The roar reverberated throughout Roran, shaking buildings and unsettling the very earth itself. This can't be. The Queen of Roran was stunned as she gazed at the colossal puppet. The overwhelming chakra radiating from it left her speechless. I sealed the dragon vein. Mukade shouldn't be able to access its chakra anymore unless. But as the words left her lips, a sudden realization dawned on her. Her beautiful eyes widened in horror. She spun around to face Rasa, her face draining of color as a cold chill swept over her. Oh no! I only sealed the dragon vein that powered Mukade's puppet factory. The true source of the dragon vein is still supplying him with chakra. Rasa simply blinked in surprise, his mind processing the new information. This revelation meant that the Queen of Roran had outlived her usefulness. She was no longer essential to his plans. Meanwhile, Mukade, now fully transformed into the monstrous creature, let out a triumphant laugh. Hee. So, you figured it out, Your Majesty. Did you really think I hadn't planned for this? Fourth Kazekage, you'll pay for everything you've done. At that moment, two members of Rasa's secret mobile unit arrived, drawn by the chaos. They froze in shock as they took in the sight of the towering creature. What is that? Lord Kazekage. Without turning around, Rasa calmly issued his orders. From now on, follow this queen's command. Focus on evacuating the civilians of this country. Leave this big guy to me. The two ninjas exchanged uncertain glances before looking at the Queen of Roran. As you command, Lord Kazekage, they said, bowing slightly. The Queen of Roran, still trying to grasp the situation, stood frozen in place. Rasa, not about to let them waste time, addressed her directly. Forget about the seal for now. I'll take care of this monster. You focus on rescuing your people from Mukade's grasp before they're caught in the crossfire. The Queen of Roran blinked, snapping out of her stupor. Glancing from the monstrous puppet to Rasa's unshaken demeanor, she felt a mix of gratitude and awe. "I understand. Thank you," she said, her voice filled with a strange, new respect. She then turned to the two ninjas. "Please, follow me." Once the trio had left, Rasa crossed his arms, a confident smirk playing on his lips as he regarded the massive puppet before him. Ultimate puppet technique? Let's see what gives you the confidence to make such grandiose claims. Seeing Rasa remain so calm and composed in the face of his ultimate creation, Mukade seethed with fury. The colossal puppet opened its gaping maw, its pincers snapping like a scorpion's, and from within, it unleashed a torrent of purple flames, roaring from the pipes embedded in its body. Dragon Vein, Grand Dragon Flame. This was Mukade's enhanced version of Fire Release, Great Fireball Jutsu, now powered by the chakra of the Dragon Vein. Its increased energy amplified both its heat and range, making it far more destructive. "Oh!" Rasa's eyes sparkled with interest, a flash of recognition crossing his mind. The technique reminded him of his recent battle with Jiraiya. Jiraiya had used natural energy to amplify his jutsu, dramatically boosting their power. The resemblance intrigued Rasa. Interesting. Let's see how far the Dragon Vein's chakra can really take you. With that thought, Rasa swiftly formed a series of hand seals, his expression focused and determined. Boom! Just as the massive purple fireball hurtled toward him, two enormous claws made of sand erupted from the ground beneath him. They slammed together with a deafening crash, completely extinguishing Mukade's Grand Dragon Flame in an instant. What? Mukade's monstrous form froze in shock, its rage momentarily replaced with disbelief. Rasa, however, looked somewhat disappointed. The chakra-enhanced fireball didn't even come close to matching the intensity or heat of the jutsu Jiraiya had used. So, the Dragon Vein's chakra isn't suited for amplifying jutsu power after all? If that's the case, let's test its other abilities. He raised his hands, his expression changing to one of focused concentration. Magnet Release, Shikaku's Avatar. Chapter 42, Sealing the Villain. Kingdom of Roran. Under Rasa's orders, the Queen of Roran led two ninjas to save her people. But what she saw next left her in shock. Not far from the Grand Palace of Roran, two giant creatures were locked in a fierce struggle. But it was hardly a battle, it was more like an overwhelming one-sided beating. One of the creatures was instantly recognizable to the Queen, it was the enormous puppet form of Enrokuzan, now controlled by Mukade. The other creature, a strange raccoon-like beast, was unfamiliar to her. However, she could guess its origins, it was likely the summoned power of that man, the Kazekage. Before her eyes, the once mighty Mukade, thought to be unstoppable, was being treated like a mere plaything. The summoned raccoon monster ruthlessly pummeled, tore apart, and smashed Mukade's puppet body with crushing force. At that moment, the Queen fully realized the terrifying power of the outside world's ninjas. Her thoughts briefly flashed back to Mukade's warning. The future of Roran will end in destruction from war. She paused for only a second, but then her eyes narrowed with resolve. Turning to the two Suna ninjas, she gave her orders with calm authority. My daughter, Sarah, is still trapped in the tower. One of you must rescue her. The other should locate where my citizens are being held captive by Mukade. The two Suna ninjas obeyed without hesitation. After all, they had come at Rasa's command to follow the Queen's orders. And so, Malka set off to rescue Sarah, while Mamushi, by sheer coincidence, had recently discovered a hidden puppet factory where countless Roran citizens were enslaved. Amid the towering structures of Roran, the battle raged on. The raccoon-like summoned beast, Shikaku's Avatar, pressed Mukade's puppet form into the earth with relentless force, its overwhelming strength tearing through Mukade's puppet body as if it were paper. If not for the regenerative power of the Dragon Vein's chakra, the fight would have been over in moments. After just a few minutes of intense combat, Rasa had already assessed the Dragon Vein chakra's limitations. Just as he had suspected, his hypothesis was spot on. The natural energy of the Dragon Vein wasn't like the chakra from Mount Myaboku, which enhanced overall abilities. Instead, it resembled the unique senjutsu techniques from Ryuchi Cave, granting powers like inorganic reincarnation, morphing transformation, and hyper-regeneration. And there was also the ability to absorb chakra. If another ninja had faced Mukade, they might have struggled against this chakra-absorbing ability. But for Rasa, this was of little concern. His magnet release technique controlled gold sand not by infusing it with chakra but through magnetic forces that allowed him to manipulate it. The sand itself contained no chakra, leaving Mukade with nothing to absorb. Still, Rasa had lost interest in continuing the fight. Compared to Minato and Jiraiya, Mukade was pitifully weak. If not for the Dragon Vein's infinite regeneration, he would be no more than a regular jonin. However, Mukade, blind to his impending doom, clung desperately to the belief that he was invincible. Though the raccoon monster dominated him, his supposed infinite chakra made him believe that he was unbeatable. He convinced himself that he could outlast Rasa's chakra supply and claim victory. As if on cue, the massive Shikaku-like beast dissolved into the sand, scattering in all directions. Just as Mukade was about to rejoice, Rasa's cold voice cut through the air. A genius puppeteer of Suna's future? If this is the village's talent, then the future looks bleak indeed. Seething with rage, Mukade barely held back his fury. Still, the surge of chakra flowing through him restored his confidence. Spare me your arrogance, Fourth Kazekage. With the Dragon Vein under my control, I possess infinite chakra. I am immortal. The moment you run dry, victory will be mine. Is that so? Rasa raised a brow, mused. So you are trying to dominate the shinobi world with such weak power? PFF, even some 16-year-olds can shove you into the ground. Unless that 16-year-old is some prophesized child with the strongest tailed beast inside. Also, if he is the protagonist. Mocking my strength? Rasa's scorn only flared Mukade's anger. I'll kill you. Drawing on the core power of the Dragon Vein, Mukade wildly absorbed its chakra. To the naked eye, his enormous body began to glow with a chakra cloak. Yet, this ends now. In the blink of an eye, Rasa vanished. What? Before Mukade could react, Rasa appeared before him, extending an arm. A suffocating dread washed over Mukade, but his arrogance blinded him to the danger. Futile. I can absorb. He never finished his sentence. Terror flooded Mukade's face as his body refused to obey him. His chakra ceased to flow. What? How? Impossible. Magnet release, prison sand burial. Rasa's right hand emitted intricate markings that spread rapidly across Mukade's massive form. Mukade only managed half a sentence before losing consciousness. This is Shikaku's. With the seal complete, Mukade's body began to shrink, reverting to his frail, human form. Unlike Sasori, Mukade hadn't turned himself into a puppet. Instead, he had relied on the Dragon Vein's morphing transformation to become a massive puppet, equipped with various weapons. What intrigued Rasa even more, however, was Mukade's use of the inorganic reincarnation ability. This puppet could even use ninjutsu. If Rasa could harness the power of the Dragon Vein and integrate abilities like inorganic reincarnation, hyper-regeneration, and chakra absorption into his Shikaku constructs, he could create truly formidable beings. Self-sustaining, ninjutsu-wielding entities, capable of regeneration and chakra absorption. The concept reminded him of the first Hokage's wood dragon technique, known for its chakra-draining abilities. Such a power would indeed be extraordinary. But for now, there was no need to rush. The Dragon Vein wasn't going anywhere. Transforming its energy into his own strength was simply a matter of time. For the moment, however, his attention turned to the sealed Mukade. There was much to uncover from him. Just then, the two Suna ninjas returned. Mission complete? Yes, Lord Kazekage. The Queen of Roran instructed us to report back first. Good. Without wasting time, Rasa issued his next command. I recall that the ANBU has specialized genjutsu techniques for interrogating prisoners and probing memories. Bring them to me. Chapter 43, Big Harvest. 3 days later, in the residence specially arranged by the Queen of Roran, Rasa's expression was a mixture of emotions. Over the past 3 days, he had carefully examined all of Mukade's memories using the illusion technique provided by the Umbu. Well, it was a lot to process. The good news was that Rasa might owe Mukade an apology. Mukade might actually be a genius. Through Mukade's memories, Rasa discovered that Mukade had uncovered the dragon vein and harnessed its chakra power to create an entirely different puppet technique system from the one developed by the second Kage. He called it the dragon vein puppet technique. While the incredible properties of the dragon vein chakra were certainly a major factor, it was Mukade's skill in perfectly integrating this chakra with puppet techniques that made Rasa recognize that Mukade might indeed be a master of his craft. What further impressed Rasa was Mukade's efforts to break the Fourth Hokage's Flying Thunder God seal on the dragon vein. Mukade had conducted extensive research on sealing techniques and made some remarkable progress. This was also why he had boldly absorbed the Flying Thunder God seal into his own body, believing that the power of the dragon vein chakra would enable him to return to the past. Unfortunately, all that knowledge was now in Rasa's possession. And the bad news? Rasa discovered through Mukade's memories that in the timeline of the Naruto world that Mukade originally existed in, there was no sign of him at all. To be precise, the timeline followed the plot exactly as it was in the original world. Without Mukade's interference as a time traveler, the fourth Kage, Rasa, died at the hands of Orochimaru, just as it had happened in Rasa's own timeline. The sequence of events was exactly as Rasa had always known it. What did that mean? It meant that, at the very least, there was a future where Rasa as a transmigrator never existed. Was this a parallel world? Or would something change in the future? Rasa couldn't say for sure. He had no way of knowing with his current abilities. But at least there was some hope. Mukade's memories contained some fragments about the Flying Thunder God seal technique. The Flying Thunder God technique, a space-time ninjutsu, involved manipulating both time and space. If Rasa could also master some abilities in this field, perhaps he could find the answers he was looking for. But for now, the most important thing was still acquiring the power of the dragon vein chakra. The Palace of the Roran Kingdom. Rasa's request for the dragon vein chakra was met with an unexpected response from the Queen of Roran. What? Rasa asked, looking at the beautiful queen with a serious expression. Are you sure? The queen nodded, her gaze unwavering. Next to her, a little girl with the same red hair as the queen clung tightly to her leg, her eyes wide with uncertainty as she looked at Rasa in surprise. Yes, I've made up my mind. I want Roran to join Sunigakure as the condition for giving you the dragon vein. If the queen had made any other request, Rasa would have likely refused immediately, because, in his eyes, this queen had no authority to make demands. But this particular proposal made him pause and think. Why? The queen's expression grew more somber as she explained. Because Roran has no other option. According to Mukade, even with the power of the dragon vein, Roran will be destroyed by war soon. So, rather than waiting for certain death, we might as well take a gamble. So, joining Sunigakure is your gamble? Yes. You are the strongest ninja I've encountered so far, and you're the Kazekage of Sunigakure, one of the 5 great countries. This is the best option for Roran right now. Rasa wasn't one to hesitate for long, and he quickly recognized this as a situation where both sides stood to gain. Whether it was the population of Roran or the queen herself, Rasa found both intriguing. But let's not misunderstand things. While the Queen of Roran was indeed beautiful and exuded a mature, wife-like charm, quite different from Karuro's youthful energy, what Rasa valued most was her ability to govern a nation. He definitely needed someone capable of managing Sunigakure. There were far too few people in the village he could trust with such a heavy responsibility. So, he had no intention of turning this down. Just to be sure, he wanted to confirm the approximate population of the new place. How many people does Roran have now? Around 3,000. Rasa was taken aback. 3,000? That was even fewer than he had expected. It would be easy to accommodate them. After all, the Sunagakure had a population of over 100,000, so absorbing these 3,000 people wouldn't cause any major disruptions. I'm inclined to agree, but the final decision will have to wait until everything's settled. You'll need to come back to Sunagakure with me. While I'm Kazekage, I still have to consider the opinions of others. But don't worry too much. There shouldn't be any issues. The queen's face immediately brightened, and she bent down to express her gratitude. Thank you, Kazekage-sama. I will be in your care from now on. No need to thank me. Roran joining Sunagakure is a win-win situation for both Roran and the village. Yes. The queen nodded, then seemed to remember something. Saramu. That's my real name. From now on, please call me that. Once Roran joins Sunagakure, there will be no more Queen of Roran. Saramu? No wonder she had once been a queen. This little political move really showed her wisdom, which pleased Rasa even more. Understood. Now, please take me to the Dragon Vein. Deeper beneath Mukade's underground puppet factory. Hundreds of meters below the ground, with Saramu's guidance, Rasa finally arrived at the birthplace of the Dragon Vein chakra. It was a breathtaking underground cave. The purple chakra flowed like molten magma, surging through the cave's walls. Above the cave was a giant circular altar. On the altar stood 4 statues, all staring down at the center, where a mysterious seal was inscribed, surrounded by glowing runes. It's here. According to our records, when our ancestors first discovered the Dragon Vein, the chakra was incredibly violent. It was our ancestors who used the sealing technique to suppress the violent energy, turning it into the gentler form it is now. And Roran's ability to survive as an oasis in the desert is thanks to the immense life force of the Dragon Vein chakra. Rasa's eyes lit up at this revelation. Chapter 44, Chakra Fruit. Ever since Rasa had arrived in the world of Naruto and ascended to the role of Fourth Kazekage, the leader of Sunagakure, he quickly realized that he couldn't live like some of his predecessors, selfishly acting alone, detached from everything. His personal interests were now deeply intertwined with those of the village. To put it simply, the Hidden Sand Village had become like a large corporation, and Rasa was the owner of it. While it's true that with enough money, he could amass power in the ninja world and perhaps even establish a new ninja village, Rasa had already succeeded in creating one of the world's top 5 ninja villages, Sunagakure being one of them, and held a substantial portion of its control. Starting from scratch would be a foolish move. Fortunately, Rasa was no fool. That's why he generously shared the power of the Star Chakra mode with Michikawa, Pakura, and Baki, and he planned to pass it down to others in the future as well. The stronger his village's overall strength, the more resources Rasa could command. Although these new powers might not have a significant impact during the final battle, they'd be more than useful in the time leading up to it, saving Rasa considerable trouble. This is why he was so committed to strengthening Sunagakure. From his month-long experience as Kazekage, Rasa identified the most significant issue preventing Sunagakure from thriving like Kanagakur, the harsh environment of the Land of Wind, or more specifically, the entire region itself. At first glance, this might seem odd. What does the strength of a ninja have to do with the environment? Shouldn't a harsh environment produce stronger ninjas? But this overlooks one critical detail: ninjas need food. It may seem trivial, but it's an undeniable fact. As the old saying goes, before soldiers march, provisions must be prepared. If ninjas can't even get enough food to sustain themselves, how can they expect to summon the energy to fight? Without that energy, how can they generate chakra? And without chakra, how could they hope to compete against ninjas from other villages? So, what was the situation like for Sunagakure and the Land of Wind? From Rasa's understanding, aside from the unforgiving climate, Sunagakure was wholly dependent on external sources. Over 80% of the Land of Wind was desert, barren and lifeless. This meant the Land of Wind was constantly battling food shortages, and the very idea of exporting food to Sunagakure was out of the question. In reality, Sunagakure didn't lack money. Thanks to his gold dust technique, Rasa could easily extract endless amounts of gold sand from the desert. What the village truly lacked, however, was food, a basic need that even money couldn't solve. Thus, Rasa had always been focused on finding ways to change the village's harsh environment. This was also why, during the meeting just days ago, he had instructed the village's ninjas to come up with ways to use their unique skills to alter the village's landscape. At that moment, Rasa's mind naturally drifted to the legendary would-release techniques of Hashirama Senju. With the power of Hashirama's would-release, a single would-release secret technique, nativity of a world of trees, would be enough to transform the barren desert surrounding Sunagakure into a thriving forest. Once a forest was established, it would help retain moisture in the soil, slowly turning the desert into fertile land perfect for farming. In an ideal world, not only could Sunagakure become a lush forest, but it could even be transformed into a vast oasis. Surely, that would be within reach. But Rasa quickly dismissed the thought. This dream was impossible. For one, Hashirama Senju was dead. Even if he were still alive, why would the Hokage of Konohagakure offer his help to Sunagakure? And as for awakening the power of would release through Hashirama's cells, Rasa wouldn't even entertain such a notion. After all, he was now the Kazekage of Sunagakure, not the Hokage of Konohagakure, and definitely not from the Hidden Leaf. Yet, as he reflected, the words of Saramu suddenly sparked a flicker of hope in his heart. Yes, the power of the Dragon Vein Chakra, in some ways, it's a form of natural energy. Using natural energy to reshape the environment makes sense, doesn't it? But then, another issue arose. The Dragon Vein was located in Roran. How could he possibly transplant such a vast source of chakra to Sunagakure? It was out of the question to move Sunagakure's entire location, especially considering its easily defensible terrain. Roran, on the other hand, was an open and exposed region, vulnerable from all sides. Saramu, who had been quietly observing Rasa, noticed the confusion on his face. She could tell he was deep in thought, struggling with the dilemma. Thankfully, Rasa's indecision didn't last long. He exhaled deeply and finally spoke. "Next, please step aside." Saramu, though still a little puzzled, nodded in acknowledgement and slowly moved away from the area. Once she was out of the way, Rasa stepped closer to the ceiling formation. At first, he hadn't sensed the full magnitude of the Dragon Vein Chakra, likely due to the ceiling barriers in place. But as soon as he stepped onto the formation, the chakra beneath him began to swirl like molten lava, and his expression shifted dramatically. This is an enormous amount of chakra. The power he could feel was massive, nearly on par with the chakra of the tailed beasts. The realization filled him with excitement. The Dragon Vein Chakra could grant him untold power. Without hesitation, Rasa pressed his right hand firmly onto the central stone eye of the ceiling formation. Boom! A diamond-shaped symbol appeared on his palm, and with it came a powerful, irresistible pulling force. In an instant, the chakra beneath the altar condensed into massive, serpentine chakra dragons, which coiled and gathered from every direction, flowing into Rasa's palm. Saramu was a woman of great intelligence. After Rasa asked her to step aside, she made the decision to leave the high tower where the Dragon Vein Chakra was being sealed. Outside, on the ground below, her daughter, Sarah, waited anxiously, surrounded by a crowd of concerned Roran citizens. "Your Majesty, are we really leaving Roran?" Some of the Roran citizens couldn't help but voice their unease. After all, this was the land where they had spent their entire lives. Saramu understood their hesitation. It was a difficult decision to accept, but for the future of Roran, she had no other choice. "Please trust me," she said with determination. "I'm doing this for Roran's future. Compared to the outside world, we are far too weak. We have no choice but to rely on such a powerful ninja village if we are to survive." The expressions of the Roran citizens tightened, but in the end, they chose to trust their queen. "We trust you, Your Majesty," one of them called out. "I'll go home and pack my things right away," another exclaimed. This overwhelming show of trust made Saramu's eyes water. There was no greater encouragement for her as a queen than the unwavering faith of her people. Meanwhile, Far below in the underground palace, where the dragon vein chakra's source resided, Rasa stood frozen, his expression shifting into something strange. Following Rasa's gaze, it became apparent that the vast chakra within the cave had been completely absorbed. In its place, floating in front of his right palm, was a peculiar fruit. It shimmered with a radiant purple light and was adorned with spiral patterns. The fruit was roughly the size of his palm. Rasa, of course, didn't entertain the thought that he had somehow stumbled into the world of One Piece. There was only one possible explanation for this mysterious fruit. A chakra fruit. His memory was a bit hazy, but he recalled something from the Naruto films. Otsutsuki Kagaya, a powerful figure, had possessed similar abilities, where chakra could be condensed into fruit-like chakra aggregates. Chapter 45, A New Stage. Rasa didn't waste any time. The very same day he absorbed the Dragon Vein chakra, he decided to take Saramu back to Sunagakure. Although Saramu could harness the power of the Dragon Vein chakra, she wasn't a ninja. So, Rasa opted to use his gold dust to fly back, which saved them a considerable amount of time. By the time nightfall arrived, Rasa and Saramu had made it back to Sunagakure. They walked side by side, traveling through the narrow, winding passageways. As Rasa had already arranged for Baki and the others to be prepared in advance, Baki was waiting at the village entrance with his subordinates. This was Saramu's first time stepping into the outside world, especially in a place as famous as Sunagakure, one of the 5 great shinobi countries. To put it simply, her first impression was one of sheer magnitude. Sunagakure was sprawling, with towering buildings and a bustling population, several times larger than Roran. Her second impression was one of desolation. The harsh environment of Sunagakure took Saramu by surprise, even as the queen of Roran. Her third impression, however, was one of oppressive dread. Saramu could almost feel the spirits of countless warriors who had passed away, lingering in the air above the village. Especially from the ninjas guarding the entrance, she sensed a chilling bloodlust, an aura of individuals who had endured unimaginable carnage. In that instant, Saramu finally understood why Sunagakure had earned its place among the 5 great shinobi countries. In stark contrast to the paradise like Roran, Sunagakure was a land soaked in death and war. For a fleeting moment, Saramu questioned her decision to bring Roran into Sunagakure. Just then, a ninja approached, his appearance terrifying, and his gaze filled with an intensity that made Saramu flinch. Kazekage-sama. The ninja greeted, to which Rasa responded, his tone distant. Has anything happened in the village during my absence? Perhaps influenced by the chilling atmosphere around them, Saramu couldn't help but feel that Rasa seemed colder than usual. Baki nodded, giving Saramu a brief look before turning his attention back to Rasa. After noticing that Rasa showed no particular reaction, he continued. The Reikage of Kumogakure and the Tsukikage of Awakagure have jointly sent us a diplomatic letter. Ah, interesting. Rasa murmured, his eyes narrowing with thought. Have the 2 elders, along with Pakura and Michikawa, go to the Kazekage Tower to wait for me. I'll be there shortly. Understood. Baki responded before leaving to carry out the orders. Once Baki was gone, Saramu finally exhaled, her shoulders relaxing as the weight of the tense atmosphere lifted for a moment. Noticing that Saramu appeared a bit tense, Rasa softened his demeanor slightly and spoke, trying to ease the mood. It feels very different, doesn't it? Sunagakure, compared to your Roran. Saramu was briefly taken aback but quickly nodded, not bothering to hide her thoughts. Everyone here feels terrifying. Of course. Rasa responded with a calm smile. This is the entrance to Sunagakure. The ninjas guarding it are the elite of the village, the pillars that support everything here. They are the protectors of everyone in this village. His words made Saramu glance at the ninjas again. They didn't seem quite as intimidating as before. Come with me. Rasa continued, motioning with his hand. I'll take you to my home. You can stay there tonight, and my wife will take care of you. Without waiting for a reply, Rasa used his sand gold technique to carry Saramu effortlessly to his home. Saramu was a little surprised but didn't refuse. In fact, Rasa's warm and welcoming attitude put her at ease. However, curiosity tugged at her. For someone as powerful as Rasa, his wife had to be just as exceptional. She wondered if they'd get along. When they arrived at Rasa's home, Saramu was taken aback to see Rasa's wife, Kurura, standing at the door. Her cheerful, loving expression, like a young wife waiting for her husband's return, left Saramu momentarily stunned. Kurura was equally surprised. Any woman would be startled if her husband suddenly brought an unfamiliar woman into their home. Fortunately, Rasa wasn't the type to make things awkward. He walked over to Kurura, casually pointing to Saramu and making the introduction. "Kurura, this is the Queen of Roran, Saramu. You can call her Saramu. Soon, she'll be leading the people of Roran to join Sunigakure and become part of our village. But for now, she's unfamiliar with everything here, so I brought her here to help her get accustomed to our village. From now on, you'll accompany her to help her learn more about Sunigakure." After speaking, Rasa gently rubbed his wife's surprised face, speaking in a soft, reassuring tone. "Don't overthink it, Kurura. Saramu's child is already more than 10 years old." The warmth of this scene caught Saramu off guard. She realized that Rasa wasn't the cold, distant man she had assumed from their previous interactions. Instead, he was a man with a tender heart who deeply respected his wife. However, for some reason, Rasa's words made her feel a little flustered, and she couldn't help but retort. "Are you calling me an old woman?" Rasa froze for a moment, clearly taken aback. "I didn't say anything." Saramu gritted her teeth in embarrassment, but strangely, the nervousness she had felt earlier began to dissipate. In that moment, Kurura regained her composure. Rasa's next words, however, immediately caused her to blush deeply. "While you're at it, Kurura, you can ask Saramu for some parenting advice." Later that night, in Sunigakure, the office, filled with the sound of the desert wind, was brightly lit. When Rasa arrived, Chiyo, Ebizo, Pakura, Michikawa, and Baki were already waiting. To Rasa's surprise, Yashimaru was also there, standing quietly behind Chiyo. It seemed that Chiyo had already understood Rasa's intentions and was grooming Yashimaru to be his successor. Rasa didn't waste any time. He immediately took his seat at the Kazekage desk. Baki, ever the observant one, handed him the diplomatic letter that had arrived the previous day. Rasa opened it and quickly understood the message from Iwagakure and Kumogakure. He passed the letter around to the others, a sneer forming on his face. This must be that old fool Inoki's idea. The Third Shinobi AE doesn't have the brains for something like this. And I will try to call Third Shinobi AE while Fourth will be called I. Seriously, Kishimoto ran out of names? Well, it's not like it is the first time both son and father have the same name. The others quickly skimmed through the diplomatic letter sent jointly by Iwagakure and Kumogakure. Ebizo, his tone as cold as ever, spoke up. "Seems like Iwagakure and Kumogakure don't want us to grow any stronger." Michikawa, too, grasped the intent behind the letter. "Their message is pretty clear. If we refuse, Iwagakure and Kumogakure will unite and attack us, won't they?" Pakura sneered, clearly unimpressed. "Ha, they want to attack Sunigakure? Iwagakure and Kumogakure should clean up their own mess first before thinking about that." Chiyo, who usually kept to herself, changed her tone. She became more serious, engaging fully in the matters of the village. "But our reputation isn't spotless either. The truce between Iwagakure and Kumogakure is something Konoha would definitely support right now. If that happens, things could get more complicated. Don't forget, the feudal lord of the Land of Fire is already urging Konoha to attack us. If we're not careful, we might end up surrounded on all sides." The room fell into a heavy silence at her words. All eyes turned toward Rasa. Rasa, usually the detached leader, paused for a moment, then tapped the desk lightly as he spoke. "My plan is simple. We can agree to the alliance between Kumogakure and Iwagakure to attack Konoha, but we cannot agree too easily." Chapter 46, Konoha's Public Enemy. Rasa's words left everyone in the room a little taken aback. Up until now, the general expectation was that Rasa would never drag Sunagakure into this war. His actions and orders over the past month had been focused on strengthening the village while the other nations were caught up in conflict. It was clear that Sunagakure's priority was to use this chaotic time to bolster itself, not engage in battle. So, as Rasa spoke, everyone waited for an explanation. My reasoning is simple. In this world of ninjas, whether it's Iwagakure, Kirigakure, or Kumogakure, I believe with enough time, Sunagakure could surpass them. But Konoha, unfortunately, I don't see a future where we could ever surpass them, not even in 10, 20, or 50 years. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed his words. Thus, from the village perspective, weakening Konoha is crucial. As Kazekage, I fully support any action that accomplishes that. Ebizo nodded thoughtfully. Kazekage-sama has a point. Even without the first Hokage and Uchiha Madara, we're still no match for Konoha. At best, we can only hope to strike when they're vulnerable. Rasa's declaration had hit home. But there was still something lingering in the air. So, what do you mean by not agreeing too easily? Pakura asked bluntly, her eyes narrowing as she addressed Rasa directly. Rasa didn't seem bothered by her challenge. Either he didn't mind being questioned, or he was simply used to it. The primary goal remains strengthening the village. Sunagakure is a ninja village, but no matter how well built it is, if it lacks powerful ninjas, it's of little use. This war, however, presents a good opportunity. Pakura's brow furrowed. Are you suggesting we send the children to the front lines? Rasa gave her a deadpan look. Do you really think I'm that reckless? Pakura fell silent, realizing she had asked a rather foolish question. Rasa then continued. A ninja's true strength can't come from training alone. They need real-world missions, actual combat. This is the best way to sharpen their abilities. Sunagakure has been lacking in this regard, but now, Iwagakure and Kumogakure have given us the perfect opening. The others in the room began to understand his plan. My strategy is simple. I don't intend to wage an all-out war with Konoha. Instead, I want to provoke small skirmishes that will put pressure on them while also turning the battlefield into a training ground for our ninjas. We'll need to discuss the specifics of how to implement this. The others exchanged looks, clearly considering Rasa's idea. But there was still a sense of caution. War is no trivial matter. Chio spoke up coldly. Rasa nodded in acknowledgement. Of course, I understand that. But ninja work is dangerous by nature. And don't worry, we won't be entering the land of fire. We'll keep the fight to the land of rivers, avoiding direct large-scale conflict. He looked around, meeting everyone's gaze. By rotating our ninjas into the field, we can give them experience while still minimizing the risks. They'll be able to take on missions and soak in the atmosphere of a battlefield, which will help them grow faster. If necessary, I, Pakura, and Michikawa can take turns overseeing the front lines. The room grew quiet again as everyone processed the plan. Slowly, they nodded in agreement. Rasa had thought the plan through carefully, and the others quickly agreed that it was a solid approach. After all, there was no better way for ninjas to grow rapidly than by stepping onto the battlefield and experiencing life and death firsthand. However, won't Iwagakure and Kumogakure object to this? Michikawa asked, his concern evident. Rasa scoffed at the question. The issue right now isn't whether they agree or not. The real issue lies with us, Sunagakure. If they want us to join the war and attack Konoha, simple diplomatic words won't be enough to make us comply. Rasa's words caught everyone off guard again. Yashimaru, who was attending such a meeting for the first time, couldn't help but admire his brother-in-law. So, this is the presence of the Kazekage. Now, let's work together on a plan. If Sunagakure's ninjas are to fight alongside Iwagakure and Kumogakure in attacking Konoha, they'll need to offer something in return. I propose we demand 10 times the standard ninja mercenary fee for our services. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Baki hesitated, his forehead tense. Kazekage-sama. Is this really all right? Of course it is. Rasa replied with unwavering confidence. He surveyed the room, leaning back in his chair with an air of authority before adding. Here's a solid justification for it. I'm the newly appointed Fourth Kazekage. My position isn't fully established yet, and the village still has internal strife. To convince the people in Sunagakure, we need something that will secure us enough leverage. A wave of understanding washed over the room. Everyone began to see the logic behind his reasoning. The discussion continued deep into the night as everyone brainstormed ways to fine-tune the plan to better align with Sunagakure's interests. Given the substantial gains from their previous surprise attack on the Land of Fire, there was a palpable sense of optimism about the success of this new plan. By morning, they had finalized Sunagakure's second invasion of the Land of Fire, with the Land of Rivers chosen as the battlefield. The battlefield was divided into 3 fronts. First front, the border between the Land of Rivers and the Land of Fire. This was the most dangerous battlefield, where Rasa, Michikawa, and Pakura would lead Sunagakure's Jonin in direct combat with Konoha's main forces. Second front, inside the Land of Rivers. This area was much safer. Few Konoha ninjas would make it past the first front. Here, Sunagakure's ninjas would face off against Konoha's forces, using this front as the main testing ground for their skills in battle. Third front, inside the Land of Wind. This area was completely safe. Newly graduated genin would handle simple escort missions here, offering them early exposure to the battlefield atmosphere. With the plan solidified, Baki would be responsible for calculating the necessary materials and military expenses for Sunagakure's deployment. These costs would be presented to Iwagakure and Kumogakure as demands for their cooperation. By dawn, the entire plan was finalized. Following Rasa's instructions, Baki set off to convey Sunagakure's demands to Iwagakure and Kumogakure. Once Baki left, the group, now fully confident in the plan they had crafted, exhaled in relief. Now, it's up to Iwagakure and Kumogakure's response. Rasa nodded. Indeed. We'll act accordingly. After all, the ones in a rush now aren't us, it's Iwagakure and Kumogakure. With the matters regarding Iwagakure and Kumogakure settled for the moment, the group shifted focus to another pressing issue. Pakura scanned the papers in front of her, then looked up, her expression serious as she asked. What's going on with Roran? Something this important, shouldn't you, as Kazekage, have discussed it with us before making a decision? Chapter 47, Roran joins. In response to Pakura's pointed question, Rasa kept his reply brief and direct. Aren't I discussing it with you right now? As for Roran, I believe I already sent someone to notify you about the situation. Pakura pursed her lips in dissatisfaction, while Michikawa narrowed his eyes slightly. Both of them understood that Roran's integration into Sunagakure would have significant consequences for the village's internal dynamics. With over 3,000 new people, it was neither a trivial number nor an overwhelming influx. But their arrival would undoubtedly shake up the delicate balance of power that had existed for so long between the aristocratic and civilian factions in Sunagakure. Both Pakura and Michikawa couldn't help but wonder if this disruption was exactly what Rasa intended. Given the potential impact on their own interests, even though they had come to respect Rasa as Kazekage, they still had strong reservations and doubts about allowing Roran, a foreign nation, to join the village. Chio, however, seemed more curious than concerned. Is what the Umbu reported true? Were our Sunagakure puppet techniques leaked? And that this person, Amrokuzan, has mastered them? Rasa, of course, had no intention of letting anyone know the full extent of the truth, especially not the future trajectory. He had concealed the true identity of Mukade and provided the name Amrokuzan to both Cat and Viper. As for the Queen of Roran, he had given her very strict instructions regarding this matter. Yes. Rasa replied, nodding as he took out a scroll he had prepared earlier and handed it to Chio. These are some details I extracted from Amrokuzan's mind using interrogation techniques through the Umbu. Chio took the scroll, examining it closely. As she read, her expression shifted to one of amazement. Incredible! This ninja, and Rokuzan, seems to have an astonishingly deep understanding of our puppet techniques. Do you know where he came from? Rasa shook his head, a slight smile on his lips. The people in the room immediately realized that he was hiding something, but none of them were brave enough to press further. Chio, in particular, had no intention of digging deeper. Since Rasa had helped cover up the crimes of her beloved grandson, Sasori, who had killed the Third Kazekage, and shifted the blame to Konoha, Chio had been mentally preparing to retire from active involvement. Rasa's secrets no longer held her interest. I see, Chio said, her voice now calm. As she continued to read, Chio began to piece together the reasoning behind Rasa's decision to integrate Roran into Sunigakure. Kazekage-sama, are you after the dragon vein chakra of Roran? To clarify for the others, Chio passed the puppet technique scroll to the remaining three. One by one, they examined the scroll in detail, taking their time to absorb the information. Rasa remained patient, his gaze flicking between the group as he watched for the subtle changes in their expressions. Ebizo appeared initially surprised, but his expression soon shifted into one of deep thought, as if some realization had struck him. Pakura, while reading the scroll, occasionally glanced at Rasa. It was clear that the mention of Dragon Vein Chakra reminded her of the Star Release Chakra that Rasa had provided during the invasion of the Land of Fire. Michikawa, too, seemed to connect the dots, though his attention was more on Rasa's ability to uncover such extraordinary powers rather than the puppet techniques themselves. Michikawa leaned forward and asked directly, "So, what exactly is this? Is it a power similar to Star Release Chakra?" At the mention of Star Release Chakra, Pakura's face lit up with curiosity, while Chio and Ebizo looked both puzzled and intrigued. Star Release Chakra? What is that? Michikawa quickly explained it to the two elders. As he spoke, a surge of powerful chakra radiated from him, clearly demonstrating his growing mastery over the Star Release Chakra. Under his explanation, the two elders began to grasp the nature of this chakra. It activated the body, allowing the user to tap into extraordinary power. Both were surprised to learn that such a miraculous form of chakra even existed in the ninja world. Rasa, sensing their confusion, added his own explanation. This power is based on overdrawing the body's potential. For younger people like me, Michikawa, or Pakura, using it a few times doesn't cause much harm. But for elders like you too. Rasa didn't finish his sentence, but the implication was clear. Chio and Ebizo exchanged glances. Chio understood immediately, while Ebizo nodded without much interest. Chio, however, seemed more intrigued by this new revelation. I'd like to study this remarkable power. Maybe it could contribute to the development of medical ninjutsu in our village. Rasa nodded, acknowledging her interest. He then turned his gaze toward Yashimaru, who was standing quietly behind Chio. I will pass on the knowledge of Star Release Chakra and the Peacock Method to Yashimaru. As for you, Chio-sama, I suggest you focus on your health, Rasa advised. Chio clicked her tongue in frustration but didn't argue with the arrangement. Rasa's willingness to share the power with Pakura and Michikawa suggested he wasn't being selfish, and his concern for her health seemed genuine. After all, both she and Ebizo were nearly 60 years old. At this point, Pakura couldn't help herself before raising the persisting question. Then what exactly is Dragon Vein Chakra? Her curiosity was clear. As someone who had already benefited from the power of Star Release Chakra, she was eager to know if Dragon Vein Chakra could offer a similar boost to her strength. However, Rasa's answer left her disappointed. Unfortunately, I don't know either. Naturally, Rasa wasn't about to reveal everything. The best lies were always a mix of truth and fiction. But I do have a theory. Dragon Vein Chakra might be a form of natural energy. Pakura and Michikawa exchanged confused looks. Neither of them fully understood what Rasa meant by natural energy. However, Chio's eyes widened in shock, and Ebizo drew a sharp breath. Is that so? Kazekage-sama, are you certain? Chio and Ebizo's reactions immediately made Pakura and Michikawa realize that natural energy must be something far more extraordinary than they'd initially thought. Rasa shook his head slightly. No, I'm not certain. It's just a guess. But I believe any power that could strengthen Sunagakure is worth exploring. Ebizo nodded firmly, his gaze resolute. That's right. When you compare the potential benefits of natural energy, Roran joining Sunagakure seems trivial by comparison. Pakura, growing more impatient with the cryptic talk, finally couldn't hold back and asked. What exactly is natural energy? Ebizo glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. Sorry, I don't know much about it either. But I've heard from the first and second Kazekage that natural energy is an incredibly powerful force. When combined with the chakra in our bodies, it allows the use of techniques called senjutsu. Senjutsu. Both Pakura and Michikawa's expressions shifted dramatically. The very mention of senjutsu conveyed the gravity of what they were dealing with. Ebizo nodded solemnly. Exactly. From what we know, aside from the legendary sage of six paths, the only other person who mastered senjutsu was Konoha's first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The sage of six paths. Hashirama Senju. The names left Pakura and Michikawa visibly shaken. The legend of Hashirama was already astonishing enough, but the mention of the sage of six paths. The sage of six paths, wasn't he just a mythical figure in stories? Does he actually exist? Pakura stammered, her usual composure slipping. Ebizo shook his head, a grim expression on his face. I'm not sure if the sage of six paths truly existed. But Hashirama Senju undoubtedly did, and he was capable of using senjutsu. According to the first Kazekage, when Hashirama used senjutsu, even the strongest-tailed beast, the Ninetales, was like a mere pet in his hands. The room fell silent. Everyone knew how terrifying Shikaku, their own village's tailed beast, was. The thought of someone wielding that much power was enough to send a shiver down anyone's spine. Rasa, sensing the heavy atmosphere, broke the silence with a quiet yet firm question. So, does anyone still have doubts about Roran joining Sunagakure? Chapter 48, Konoha's Background. Faced with Rasa's question, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Indeed, if the exchange involved the Dragon Vein Chakra, Roran's integration into Sunagakure seemed less consequential. However, if we could master Dragon Vein Chakra, would we be able to use the power of sage techniques? Pakura asked, curiosity clear in her voice as she turned to both Rasa and Ebizo. Unfortunately, the answer was still a firm no. No. In truth, even now, I can't confirm whether Dragon Vein Chakra is truly natural energy, let alone if it could be used for sage techniques. Even if it is natural energy, sage techniques aren't simply about infusing natural energy into one's body and mixing it with chakra. To put it bluntly, I still have no clue how to harness the power of Dragon Vein Chakra. At this point, Rasa's tone became more resolute. However, just because we don't have any clear leads doesn't mean we should let such power go untapped or, worse, fall into the hands of our enemies. I've always said the gap between us and Konoha can't be bridged by time alone. Konoha's foundation runs too deep. Take sage techniques for instance. Konoha has mastered not one, but 3 distinct styles of sage techniques. Meanwhile, Sunagakure has none. 3 styles of sage techniques? Chio and Ebizo both looked surprised at this revelation. Rasa didn't hold back, both to unite Sunagakure against a common enemy and to shed light on Konoha's overwhelming strength. From what I know, there are currently 3 sage techniques, each tied to one of the 3 great sacred lands of the ninja world, Mount Maiboku, Ryuchi Cave, and Shikatsu Forest. As for Mount Maiboku's inheritors, we've already encountered them on the battlefield. Encountered them? Pakura and Michikawa were taken aback, their brows furrowing as the pieces slowly came together. It seems you figured it out. That's right, it's the Toad Sage Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, and the opponent we fought, Minato Namikaze. Their summoning beasts originate from Mount Maiboku. Does that mean Jiraiya and Namikaze Minato have mastered sage techniques? Michikawa asked, but Rasa shook his head in response. I can't confirm if Minato Namikaze has mastered them, but Jiraiya, I'm certain he has. That's why, during our last battle, I repeatedly warned against escalating the conflict. If Jiraiya were to use sage techniques, even I wouldn't stand a chance. The room fell deathly silent. To hear the Kazekage himself admit that he wouldn't stand a chance was deeply unsettling. After a long pause, Pakura spoke, unwilling to accept the situation. Didn't you say there are also Ryuchi Cave and Shikatsu Forest? If we could find these two sacred lands and learn their sage techniques, wouldn't we have a chance against Konoha? Unfortunately. Rasa's voice carried a note of disappointment as he continued. Ryuchi Cave's inheritor is Orochimaru. Shikatsu Forest's inheritor is Tsunade. The silence in the room deepened, the weight of the realization settling heavily on everyone present. At that moment, the atmosphere in the Kazekage's office grew heavy, as though dark clouds were pressing down on the city. Everyone felt like a mountain was crushing them, their chests constricted as they struggled to breathe. Rasa sighed deeply. So now you understand, sitting in the Kazekage's seat is no easy task. Hearing his words, everyone lifted their heads and looked at Rasa, seated in the Kazekage's chair. In that instant, Rasa's figure seemed to grow taller, more commanding in their eyes. This world really is unfair. Chio lamented, to which Rasa could only offer an apologetic smile. It is. This is why, even though Konoha is fighting on 3 fronts right now, I honestly don't have high hopes for the outcome of this war. As for Dragon Vein Chakra, although we still don't know how to use it, giving up on it is not an option. It's our only chance to catch up to Konoha. Hi! Everyone nodded firmly. Seeing this, Rasa felt a sense of relief. Though Sunagakure had its share of internal conflicts, at least the highest-ranking leaders wouldn't undermine him when it came to the village's interests. With that, Rasa brought the meeting to a close. Once Roran officially becomes part of Sunagakure, I'll assign ANBU operatives to guard the Dragon Vein. If any of you are interested, you're welcome to investigate it yourselves. Perhaps you'll gain some unique insights. Though Rasa had already absorbed the Dragon Vein's chakra as a source of natural energy, the Dragon Vein's reserves would gradually replenish over time. Chio added. At the very least, this puppet technique created by that man named Anrokuzen has inspired this old lady. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave and dive into some research. Rasa nodded before adding. Good. In the meantime, I'll ensure the Queen of Roran familiarizes herself with our village. Preparations will also begin to welcome Roran citizens. In 7 days, Sunagakure will formally integrate them into our village. With heavy expressions, Chio, Ebizo, Michikawa, and Pakura left one by one. Yashimaru also excused himself alongside Chio. But Rasa had no time to rest. News of the Kazekage's return spread quickly, and he was soon approached by key department heads. The Education Department's head, Gashima, the Logistics Department's head, Ruji, and the Medical Department's head, Iris, all arrived to present their plans. Rasa briefly reviewed them. To be honest, there were no great surprises, but there were also no glaring flaws. Both Gashima and Iris's plans focused on expanding the Ninja Academy and the village hospital. The Ninja Academy would train more shinobi, while the hospital would cultivate more medical nin. They also presented lists of candidates, chunin from the village, whom they hoped could serve as teachers for the academy or as doctors in the hospital. If their plans went smoothly, this year's enrollment would double, increasing from 300 students to 600. The number of classes would expand from 6 to 12. Though the graduation rate would likely drop, the Academy's current graduation rate for Genin was already high, around 90%. Even with a slight decline, the Academy could still produce over 500 new ninjas for Sunagakure annually. Even if these new ninjas remained at the Genin level for their entire lives, the ability to use chakra alone would make them far more capable than ordinary civilians. Moreover, with an increased graduation rate, the number of medical nin would also grow significantly. Even those who couldn't become full-fledged medical nin could learn basic healing techniques, which would greatly enhance the safety of shinobi teams and improve the village's overall medical infrastructure. Of course, this wasn't an overnight process. Training ninjas required time. Gashima even proposed extending the Ninja Academy's program from 4 years to 6 years, mirroring Konoha's system. Rasa approved this change without hesitation. After all, it wasn't practical to expect 10-year-olds to fight on the battlefield. Ryuji, on the other hand, proposed improving the village's compensation system and establishing an orphanage. Rasa agreed, though the choice of who would oversee the orphanage gave him other ideas. Once he finished reviewing the proposals from Gashima, Ryuji, and Iris, Gashima handed Rasa another document, a list of names. As Rasa glanced through it, he realized that the current class of students at the Ninja Academy was about to graduate. Chapter 49, The Barrenness of Sunagakure. Rasa skimmed through the list quickly, his sharp eyes scanning each name. Sun 8, Otanashi, Risato, Ryokan. These were some of the most promising genin selected by Gashima from this year's graduating class, what he called the elite class. In every ninja village, jonin were a scarce and valuable resource. For these so-called elite genin to someday serve as mentors for the newly graduated students, they would first have to prove themselves capable. The rest of the graduates? They would remain as low-ranking genin, their futures tied to the slow, grinding process of accumulating enough experience to one day qualify as chunin. But as Rasa continued down the list, he felt no spark of excitement, no sense of discovery. There was nothing extraordinary about these children. The ones on the list had made it there because of specific traits that stood out: exceptional chakra control, possessing 2 or more chakra natures, or a natural affinity for puppet techniques. While these abilities were impressive compared to the average ninja, they were far from remarkable on a larger scale. What troubled Rasa even more was the sheer lack of candidates. There were only 12 names. Enough for, at most, for elite classes. Noticing Rasa's dissatisfaction, Gashima shifted uncomfortably and quickly tried to justify the numbers. Kazekage-sama, I deeply apologize. This year's graduating class doesn't have many outstanding talents. But once the Ninja Academy is expanded, we'll have better results. Rasa gave a slight nod, his face calm but unreadable. Don't misunderstand me. These children are the future of Sunagakure. I'm merely considering how we can help them grow into stronger ninjas. Even as he said this, a feeling of helplessness settled in his chest. The barrenness of Sunagakure, its lack of resources and talent, was a weight he could never quite shrug off. It had been 47 years since the village was founded. During the reign of the second Kazekage, Sunagakure had been able to compensate for its resource shortages with innovative advancements in puppet techniques and sand manipulation. At its peak, the village had a formidable force of over 1,000 chunin. And these numbers are based on the original figures from the Fourth Shinobi War for consistency. But then came the Second Great Ninja War. A devastating conflict that had cost them dearly. Today, only about 300 chunin remained, and many of them were aging veterans from the first or second generations. The third Kazekage, despite his strength and commanding respect, lacked the ingenuity of his predecessor. This lack of vision had resulted in a slow but steady decline in Sunagakure's shinobi ranks. Each year, no more than 10 genin successfully became chunin. As for jonin, the numbers were even bleaker. If 1 or 2 ninjas achieved jonin rank in a year, it was considered an achievement worthy of celebration. Rasa rubbed his temples, frustration evident on his face. It seems I need to come up with a plan. At this rate, no matter how tirelessly Sunagakure worked to develop its ninjas, it wouldn't be enough to close the gap between them and Konoha. The truth was unavoidable: this was a problem of bloodlines. Sunagakure simply didn't have enough strong bloodlines to compete. If they wanted to level the playing field, they would have to rely on advancements in technology and experimentation. For some reason, the thought of the dragon vein chakra fruit he had obtained in Roran resurfaced in Rasa's mind, prompting him to make a firm decision. The jonin instructor list you presented, I approve it. With a wave of his hand, Rasa signed the document decisively. Without missing a beat, he continued. The construction of the Ninja Academy, the medical department, and the orphanage is now our top priority. From this moment on, all resources in the village must be directed toward these efforts. As for the new batch of children entering the academy, we'll wait until the school expansion is completed. That should take roughly a month, giving us enough time to prepare. In 7 days, a group of citizens from Roran will integrate into Sunigakure. Any children of the appropriate age among them must also be enrolled in the academy. Ensure the school continues to expand as needed. Understood! With no further matters to discuss, the 3 advisors bowed and departed. Not long after, Baki entered the room, his posture straight and professional. Kazekage-sama, the diplomatic letters to Iwagakure and Kumogakure have been delivered by the Umbu, as instructed, secretly. Rasa shook his head. No, it shouldn't be secret. Make it public. I want Konoha to know. Baki paused, considering the implications before nodding in agreement. Understood, Kazekage-sama. I'll ensure the Umbu handles it appropriately. Rasa gave a slight nod of approval before shifting to another matter. How's the progress on the public notice about gathering suggestions to improve the village's transportation and environment? Prepared for the inquiry, Baki pulled a scroll from within his robes and presented it. It's ready, Kazekage-sama. We're only waiting for your approval before posting it throughout the village. Rasa unfurled the scroll and skimmed it quickly. The contents were clear, but he frowned at one detail. The rewards are too stingy. Increase them. Anyone offering practical and useful suggestions should be rewarded at the level of an A-rank mission, along with the same privileges granted to a jonin in the village. If the suggestions are proven actionable, upgrade the reward to S rank. Grant them the privileges of an elder. Baki looked taken aback. He hesitated, as though about to object, but Rasa cut him off. It's just money and honorary titles, Rasa said, his tone calm but firm. The village isn't lacking in these things. Reluctantly, Baki nodded in agreement. As Baki prepared to leave, Rasa's voice stopped him once more. How is Bunpuku? At the sudden mention of the Jinchuriki, Baki straightened, responding promptly. Bunpuku is doing very well. I've assigned Umbu medical ninjas to ensure his care. Rasa, satisfied, issued another instruction. Starting today, elevate Bunpuku's status and treatment to that of an elder. Baki's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected order. He hesitated, then cautiously asked. And what about his surveillance? Rasa's gaze turned steely. I've already made arrangements for that. Now, come with me. We'll visit Bunpuku together. When Rasa stepped out of his office, the sky had already brightened. The desert heat was beginning to rise, and the scorching sun cast its relentless glare over Sunigakure. Under Baki's guidance, Rasa made his way swiftly to Bunpuku's current location. Concerned about the possibility of the tailed beast running amok, Baki had arranged for Bunpuku to reside in a temple on the westernmost edge of the village. From the outside, the temple appeared worn and weathered by time, yet it held great historical significance. This was the ancient site where the first Kazekage had sealed Shikaku, earning it the name Temple of the Sand. Had the second Kazekage not experimented with sealing Shikaku into Bunpuku's body, the tailed beast would likely still be imprisoned within this temple. Have the Umbu ninjas withdraw for now, Rasa ordered. Baki nodded and relayed the command, stepping aside as Rasa entered the temple alone. The structure was built against a towering cliff, its walls carved into the rock to create a network of interconnected caves, which served as shrines. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings of shikaku and violet floral patterns, faded but still striking against the stone. Most of the temple had long been abandoned, its outer sections falling into disrepair. Only the main hall remained intact, maintaining a sense of solemn dignity amid the decay. As Rasa stepped into the courtyard, he saw the frail figure of Bunpuku, sweeping slowly with deliberate movements. The old man's hunched form was a stark contrast to the vast emptiness of his surroundings. Hearing footsteps, Bunpuku looked up, startled, before quickly clasping his hands together in greeting while also bowing deeply. "Greetings, Kazekage-sama." Rasa returned the gesture with a nod, his eyes scanning the quiet surroundings. "It seems you've been managing well here." Bunpuku straightened and nodded. "Yes, I've been well. Though Shikaka doesn't particularly like being here, this place reminds him of the first Kazekage and his seal. It's much better than being confined in a prison." "It's peaceful, thank you, Kazekage-sama." "There's no need to thank me. This is what you deserve." Rasa paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Noticing the hesitation, Bunpuku gave him an encouraging look. "Please, Kazekage-sama, speak freely," the elderly monk said softly. "I came here to discuss a potential relocation. I possess a treasure, one of great value, that will require the combined strength of both you and Shikaku to protect. By the way, the sealing tool used to imprison Shikaku, the black teapot, it's still here, correct?" Chapter 50, God Tree? Under the blazing sun, amidst the endless yellow dunes, a golden sand cloud floated swiftly through the air, heading deeper into the vast desert. Standing atop the sand cloud, Bunpuku and Baki flanked the black teapot, their expressions a mix of unease and puzzlement. The scorching heat didn't bother them as much as the mystery of why Rasa had brought them to this treacherous part of the desert. Carrying the sealing tool for Shikaku, the black teapot, only heightened their anxiety. Even for seasoned ninjas, the overwhelming expanse of the desert could evoke a rare sense of helplessness. This was no ordinary wasteland, this was the infamous Demon Desert, feared for its deadly terrain and unpredictable dangers. After nearly 50 kilometers of flight, Rasa sensed that they were close and commanded the sand cloud to descend. The three landed on the soft, shifting sands. Without a word, Rasa crouched down and pressed his hand against the ground, channeling his chakra into the layers of sand beneath. The terrain beneath the surface revealed itself to him through the sand's unique sensory properties, as though the desert were whispering its secrets directly into his mind. After a moment of silence, Rasa straightened and nodded with certainty. This is it." Bunpuku and Baki exchanged confused glances. All around them stretched an endless sea of sand. Nothing about the area seemed out of the ordinary. Before their growing confusion could turn into questions, Rasa spoke. "This is the convergence point of all the underground rivers that flow beneath Sunagakure." Both men stiffened in shock. The seemingly ordinary desert beneath their feet was, in fact, a critical location. Yet, they couldn't fathom why Rasa had brought them here, of all places. Baki chose to remain silent, but Bunpuku, more forthright, clasped his hands together and asked calmly. "Kazekage-sama, is the treasure you wish us to protect with our and Shikaku's powers hidden here?" Rasa shook his head, his golden eyes glinting with determination. "The treasure has been with me all along. But instead of keeping it for myself, I've decided its true value lies in sharing its power with everyone in the village." Reaching into his cloak, Rasa retrieved a sealing scroll. In one fluid motion, he unsealed it with a single hand, and a delicate jade box materialized in his grasp. Even before the box was opened, the intense chakra radiating from it filled the air. Both Bunpuku and Baki felt their breathing hitch under the oppressive energy. The overwhelming power caused even Shikaku, sealed within Bunpuku, to stir restlessly, as if agitated by the presence of a rival. The chakra was no less imposing than the tailed beast's own, and the tension in the air was palpable. Rasa noticed their expressions of curiosity but chose not to elaborate on the jade box's contents. Instead, he continued in a steady voice. "If we wish to make Sunagakure strong, we must strengthen both our people and our environment. We don't have the inherited secret techniques passed down through generations, like Konoha. Nor do we have the fertile lands of the Land of Fire. If we want to survive and thrive, we have to forge our own path." Baki stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the jade box in Rasa's hands. Memories of the Stardust Chakra Rasa had gifted him once before resurfaced, sparking both curiosity and apprehension. Bunpuku, observing the scene, seemed to grasp Rasa's intentions. With a thoughtful expression, he inquired again. "I see now. Kazekage-sama plans to use this chakra, channel it through the underground rivers, and gradually transform both the villagers' physical constitutions and the environment around the village. But, Kazekage-sama, are you certain this chakra won't bring any negative effects? Rasa's reply deepened Bunpuku's concern. No. I'm not sure. The honest admission made Bunpuku scratch his forehead. While the people of Roran had lived in the presence of the Dragon Vein chakra for generations without incident, Rasa's inherently cautious nature prevented him from taking unnecessary risks. That's precisely why I brought the black teapot here. Clutching the jade box firmly, Rasa approached the black teapot, the small yet powerful artifact capable of sealing Shikaku. Though unassuming in size, its interior concealed a vast, hidden space. Open! With a deft motion, Rasa unlocked the intricate sealing mechanism on the black teapot. The lid lifted, revealing the dark, hollow interior. Guided by his control over the surrounding sand, Rasa carefully placed the jade box inside the teapot. Next, he formed a series of intricate hand seals, the movements fluid and precise. His palms slammed into the desert floor with a resounding boom. The ground trembled as 4 colossal sand statues erupted from the dunes around them, each towering at an imposing height of 15 meters. These massive constructs, molded with immense precision and chakra, loomed over the group like ancient sentinels. From the palms of the statues, countless seals began to unfurl, intricate and glowing. The seals stretched outward, weaving together to form a complex network of binding runes that enveloped the entire area. Dragon Vein Seal, Destruction. The initial command caused the sealing formation to ripple, carving a blank space at its center. Dragon Vein Seal, Release. With the second command, the sand within the blank space began to collapse inward, forming a massive pit at the core of the formation. Rasa straightened, momentarily observing the results of his work before turning to address Bunpuku and Baki. For safety, I will perform a double-layered seal on the chakra within the jade box. The first layer is the black teapot, which will act as the primary containment for the chakra. The second layer is the dragon vein seal you see here, designed to temper the violent nature of the chakra inside. Rasa's eyes locked onto Bunpuku as he continued, his voice calm but firm. While I can't guarantee there will be no adverse effects, the people of Roran have thrived for decades under the influence of the dragon vein chakra without incident. With these 2 layers of safeguards in place, even if side effects arise, we'll have time to address and rectify them. He paused, allowing his words to settle before delivering the crux of his plan. All of this is to ensure the chakra within this jade box can be shared with every villager in Sunagakure. It's a gift of strength, a chance to uplift everyone, just as your name suggests, Bunpuku, distributing blessings. Bunpuku's cloudy eyes suddenly gleamed with clarity as realization dawned upon him. Bowing solemnly, he nodded. I understand, Kazekage-sama. Leave it to me. For the future of Sunagakure, I, along with Shikaku, will protect this place. Rasa acknowledged Bunpuku's resolve with a slight nod before turning to Baki. Baki, from this moment forward, the existence of this place must remain known only to you. You'll also be responsible for ensuring Bunpuku has everything she needs to live comfortably here. Understood, Kazekage-sama. Baki replied firmly. With all arrangements in place, Rasa wasted no time. Harnessing his mastery over sand, he guided the lid of the black teapot into position above the pit. As Rasa had outlined earlier, the black teapot, which had once imprisoned Shikaku, would now serve as the vessel for the dragon vein chakra. By leaving a calculated gap in the sealing mechanism, the dragon vein chakra from the chakra fruit would be released in controlled amounts. The dragon vein seal from Roran would then temper and diffuse the chakra, sending it into Sunagakure's underground rivers to nourish both the land and its people. However, when Rasa buried the black teapot within the intricate dragon vein seal and removed the Shikaku seal from the jade box, the anticipated overflow of chakra didn't occur. Instead, the chakra fruit remained suspended within the black teapot's hidden space, motionless. Rasa frowned in confusion. He had not foreseen this outcome. His understanding of the chakra fruit was incomplete, and the silent, inert fruit left him momentarily perplexed. Behind him, Bunpuku and Baki exchanged uncertain glances. They could sense something was amiss, but the solemnity of the moment kept them silent. Minutes stretched into an uneasy stillness. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Rasa stirred, breaking his immobility. With a swift motion, he manipulated the surrounding sand to pour into the black teapot's hidden space. Just as Baki and Bunpuku began to wonder what Rasa was attempting, an unexpected flash of green shimmered from within the teapot. They stared wide-eyed as a small sapling slowly emerged from the teapot's depths. Its tender branches stretched outward, unfurling vibrant green leaves. As the sapling grew, the transformation of the surrounding desert began. Patches of soft grass and colorful flowers sprang to life from the once barren sands. The stark, arid landscape gradually softened into an oasis of vitality, as if the land itself were awakening. Both Bunpuku and Baki stood in stunned silence, struggling to process the miraculous sight before them. But no one was more surprised than Rasa himself. He had not expected his improvised solution to bear fruit, literally. When his initial plan had failed, a wild idea had crossed his mind. If it's a fruit, like a seed, maybe it can be planted. Perhaps it will function differently if treated as such. He had acted on a hunch, driven by the logic of a world where god trees and chakra could defy conventional understanding. Now, as he watched the sapling take root and begin to reshape the unforgiving desert, his mind raced. So, is this also a god tree? That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 3. Peace.